Three, two, one. Hello, everyone. This is Thersites the Historian. I'm joined this evening by Sean Chick, and we're finishing up our list of the many Union Corps commanders from the American Civil War. This has been delayed for quite a while due to circumstances, but now it is time to bring this great work to a close. So, Sean, how you doing this evening?
Yeah, it's been a long drunken day. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Actually, speaking of drinking, I went to a new distillery this weekend and got a new bottle of rye whiskey, and pretty pleased with it actually.
Hey, you got any bitters?
No, I don't have anything like
Yeah,
that.
right, right. Rye goes well with bitters, man. Rye goes well with bitters.
Because
You know.
I usually when I drink bourbon or whiskey, I usually just drink it straight with, and then have a cup of water nearby. But it I liked it. This one tastes really good on its own.
Which one?
It's
Which
by a
one
place
is it?
called Echo Spirits, so it's just a local affair. But
Okay.
I was pretty pleased with it, and even though it was more expensive than the stuff I usually buy, I think I made a good purchase. Although right now I'm actually drinking a pumpkin beer, which was not my best decision in terms of beer, but it's okay, and hopefully Tina will like it.
Hey, it's the season for pumpkin beer, though, right?
It's true. I should have just stuck with Oktoberfest, which I know I will always like, but I did not have the foresight to do that. So
Oh, which Oktoberfest?
pretty much any of them. I mean, I like most Oktoberfest.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I see for the thumbnail you chose the painting of Lincoln, Grant, and Sherman talking about the end of the war,
Yeah,
or how it's going to end, right?
I mean that's how commanders got made and unmade, right? Mostly those guys, at least in the end of the war.
Very true. That painting's interesting because they, of course, have a rainbow behind Lincoln. You know, because he's the Jesus of American history, right?
Yes,
So
true.
you got to put a rainbow behind the guy.
Also,
Um,
perhaps he was gay.
are you talking about log cabin Republicans right now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, I've heard the infrastructure bill is dead.
Yeah, last I heard, the Manchin and Biden are not getting along on that front, but I haven't heard anything since Thursday or Friday, probably. So I can't really.
Well, here's the funny thing about that. We say Manchin. Apparently, a bunch of Democrats don't want to vote for it. They're just making Manchin the point man because he can take the hit and it's okay. Um, you know, so apparently a lot of Democrats actually aren't into it. Among them, Chuck Schumer, apparently.
Hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, another W for the Biden administration, I guess.
Yep. Let's see. So the guy. So I guess you can see my screen on your stream.
I can see the Corps commanders list. My God, we got a lot of them tonight.
Yeah. So
Holy
the
shit.
guy my thing's on right now, sitting in the chair. Is this AJ Smith?
Yes, Andrew Jackson Smith is sitting in a chair. I see him on the second row next to between Quincy Gilmore and Alexander McCook.
Okay. Well, I think I just put him where he was based on last time. Now I'm trying to find Edward M. McCook, because he's the guy we didn't talk about last time, but I guess he'd be the guy we left off on.
Alexander McCook.
Oh,
It's Alexander.
okay.
I know there's a lot of McCooks. I get it. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So which one is he?
Um, he has a mustache, roundish face. He's next to Andrew Jackson Smith.
Okay, so he is sort of on the younger side for these guys.
Oh yeah, definitely,
Okay, I
definitely.
think I know who you're talking about then. Yeah, roundish face, mustache. Okay. So last time we didn't talk about him because we had the wrong image, but now we have him. So I guess we should start with him then.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. All right. So we'll start with Alexander McCook. Um, Alexander McCook has some of the most fun insults thrown at him during the war. Sherman called him a juvenile. One of his subordinates called him a chucklehead. I want to know what a chucklehead is exactly. All right. So anyway,
I've heard of a chuckle fuck before, but I've never heard of a chucklehead.
he's a chucklehead, man. He was not held in high regard by a lot of people. Now, to be fair to Alexander McCook, he did pretty well as a division commander at Shiloh. But based on that, he gets promoted to corps command, and literally his corps, he fights in 3 battles: Perryville, Stones River, and Chickamauga. In all 3 battles, his corps is routed. That's a horrible record to have.
But it is consistent.
Absolutely. It's consistent, and it's horrible. Yeah. There's not much really to say in that regard. I mean, he's a brave man, but he's an F. He's like one of the dumbest corps commanders of the entire Civil War. He's promoted beyond his abilities.
So maybe that's what it means to be a chucklehead.
Yeah, he made a fine brigade or division commander, but not the level they put him at all. So yeah, Alexander McCook is an F, definitively an F.
Okay.
Now I see the Okay, good. I got to start ranking some of these guys right here because I see that we have. You sent me the link to the list. But there's a bunch of people from last time here.
Well, yeah, it's because I wanted to have everybody up on the screen all at once as all of them together. So I put the people up who we already ranked. So we already have George Thomas at an S. We have Hancock, Hooker, and A.J. Smith at an A. At a B, we have David Stanley. We have no one at the C yet. And at the D, we have Oliver Otis Howard, Edwin Sumner, James Birdseye McPherson. What?
So wait, we got Stanley at a B, and our A is Hancock, Hooker, and who else again? Smith, A.J. Smith.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, and who's our... Nobody at C. And D, we have a lot of people. Yeah. We have Howard, and who else?
So we got Howard, Sumner, McPherson, McClernand, and Crittenden. And then for E, we have Sickles, Slocum, and Sherman. And then at the F, we had Baldy Smith and Quincy Adams Gilmore. And then, of course, we just added McCook.
Gotcha. So D, we had Howard, Sumner, McPherson, McClernand, and who else?
Crittenden.
Okay, gotcha. And F, we had Gilmore and Baldy Smith.
Yep.
E, who do we have at E? Sickles?
Yeah, E is Sickles, Slocum, Sherman.
Got it. All right, fantastic. I'm all lined up then. Okay, so Alexander McCook, yeah, he's a hard F. He's one of the absolute worst corps commanders of the entire Civil War.
Yeah, I guess we'll table that for just a second and come back at the end to see who is the king of the Fs. Like, which one of them is the most F? Which one of them might even need a lower tier if one existed?
Yeah, man, McCook and Gilmore might fight it out, you know?
All right. So that's pretty... So I guess we already got some of the real heavy hitters out here. All right. So the next gentleman we have up, unless I'm mistaken, that would be John F. Reynolds, right?
I see Fitzjohn Porter.
Or is that Fitzjohn
It's a color
Porter?
image.
Yes.
Yeah. Fitzjohn Porter, he's very interesting. He was essentially McClellan's right-hand man in the Army of the Potomac when he's organizing the army and getting it ready. What happens with McClellan is he doesn't actually want to appoint anybody to corps command. Anyway, Lincoln and Stanton appoint McClellan's corps commanders for him. Fun fact, they're all people who don't like McClellan. So, to try to counterbalance the fact they don't like him, McClellan creates another corps and gives it to his friend Fitzjohn Porter, who is going to be engaged in almost every battle of the 7 Days, most famously Mechanicsville, Gaines Mill, and of course Malvern Hill. He does superb during the 7 Days, managing his soldiers, choosing good defensive ground, and holding his ground. The second Bull Run, he didn't like John Pope at all. He also knew Pope was replacing his friend McClellan. He did his duty at Second Manassas, though. And then he was at Antietam, where he rather famously, apparently, essentially told McClellan not to commit his reserve into battle. So some people think that Porter is one of the reasons why the Battle of Antietam is less decisive than it could have been. All that being said, Porter is a fantastic tactician and commander. His main liability is that he is a hardcore Democrat. That's his liability, and he's friends with McClellan. But otherwise, he had an excellent record. First-rate soldier, really. I would give him an A.
Okay, so we have our 4th A overall for Fitz John Porter. Actually, this is a guy I knew very, very little about, so I had no idea what he was going to rank.
He was actually stripped of his rank during the war. And it wasn't because he did anything that bad. It was simply like, how do we get at McClellan? You can't get at him directly without causing problems. So you get at him indirectly. That is to say, you go after his right-hand man, you disgrace him and strip him of his rank. And it really became a partisan political issue after the Civil War. You know, Republicans would go, Porter got what he deserved, and then Democrats would go, we need to rehabilitate Fitzjohn Porter. It definitely didn't help that James Garfield became president for a bit, and Garfield was one of the men who condemned Porter. You know? Yeah. So anyway, Porter eventually, though, did win over Grant to his cause, and a few other people. So eventually, things, relatively speaking, worked out for him. You know? But, yeah, so...
So he's one of those guys, had he not been sacrificed in an attempt to get at McClellan, he could have made a lot more contributions and really helped out.
Yes. It's really an example of when people are, like, thinking about the Civil War, I think of it as, you know, Lincoln's looking for a competent general. I'm like, no, he's not. He's looking for a guy who follows orders and agrees with them politically. And Porter and McClellan are not it. You know? And so, yeah, to get at McClellan, they go after a fantastic military commander and humiliate him. It's absolutely awful. You know, in terms of the way the U.S. Army treats its officers, it's one of the lowest points in the Army's history, really, what they did to him. I mean, yeah, we're talking about a brave, devoted, patriotic man who was repaid with that by having his rank removed and being publicly insulted for decades. Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
But there you go. Yeah, but there you go, kids. You know, competency doesn't mean everything. It's a lot of it has to do with who you're friends with.
Yeah, you can get away with not knowing much as long as you know a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. But up next we have John Fulton Reynolds.
Yeah, I would say one of the big names of the war for the Union, one of the real legends, sort of their Stonewall Jackson in a way.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Although he didn't do incredibly much in Corps Command. I mean, he was involved in the Chancellorsville campaign. People had a very high opinion of him. He was a McClellan guy, by the way, but not like in the way Porter was. I mean, because, you know, Porter is literally McClellan's right-hand man. You know, Reynolds is simply somebody who backs McClellan, if you will. Supposedly, Lincoln and Halleck offered him command of the Army, and he essentially said no because he was afraid of interference from Washington. Anyway, he got to lead a corps at Gettysburg, and that's where he died, famously. Yeah, Reynolds was extremely brave, very much a picturesque soldier. Some of dying the way he did definitely helps his reputation, but it does appear that people just generally had a high opinion of John Fulton Reynolds. That being said, nothing he did was that spectacular nor that terrible. I would give him a C.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess my impression of him has always been that he had a reputation kind of like Stonewall Jackson, in the sense that I think he started out as the commander of the Iron Brigade, right?
No, but the Iron Brigade was in his corps.
Oh.
But no,
okay.
he wasn't the commander of the Iron Brigade. John Gibbon was the commander of the Iron Brigade.
Oh.
Yeah. But Reynolds commands the Iron Brigade at Gettysburg. They show him doing that in the movie Gettysburg, where he's like, Iron Brigade forward, and they charge in, then he gets shot, you know?
Right. And where did he rank among the Corps commanders? I mean, so I guess before Meade arrived, who was actually in charge?
What do you mean before Meade arrived?
Because I know that Meade wasn't on the field for the entirety of day one, so
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. He was in command for a minute, and then he got killed. Command passed to Oliver Otis Howard for a minute, for a while actually, for most of day one. Then Hancock arrived. Howard had to give command to Hancock. He wasn't excited about it, by the way. But yeah, Hancock arrives and is like, I'm Meade's representative. I'm in charge. So Hancock takes command on the night of the first day. Yeah, he's not in command at Gettysburg for more than an hour or two, really.
Oh. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and we already ranked Howard, so you know.
Yeah, so it was a downgrade when Reynolds got hit.
It was definitely a downgrade, that's for sure. I mean, I'm not saying this guy's like a military genius. Maybe he was. He was a little bit untested, if you will. I mean, he was very well thought of, and people liked him, but he was a bit untested.
Yeah, I guess that could be an interesting what if. What if Reynolds doesn't get shot on day one?
Yeah, that could be interesting, yeah.
All right. Well, I think our next gentleman is Samuel Peter Heintzelman.
Oh, yeah, he was one of the anti-McClellan men who got given a corps the 7 Days campaign. Yeah, Heintzelman didn't do very well overall. Started suffering health problems as well. It actually must be said that, interestingly enough, the corps commanders who were appointed under McClellan by Lincoln and Stanton, such as Heintzelman, were all failures. You had Heintzelman, Sumner, McDowell, and Keyes. And they're all failures. You know. Heintzelman was also a fairly hands-off corps commander. It was kind of above his mental abilities in some ways. He's pretty much an E.
Okay. I'm trying to think who this guy looks like, because he reminds me of somebody. I can't quite put my finger on it, though.
I can see what you mean.
He's also got sort of a smug expression. You can't really see it fully through the beard, but you can tell he's very pleased with himself in this picture. This must have been before he actually went to the field.
He's not an idiot, by the way. He actually had some pretty good strategic ideas. It's just that corps command is not what he's good at.
So he could have been a good...
He's essentially only... He's mostly appointed to corps command because he doesn't like McClellan. That's really what it is.
Ah, I see. Okay, well, next up we have William Buell Franklin.
All right. This guy's a hard F.
Okay.
A hard F. One of the most incompetent generals of the American Civil War. The only reason he kept having a job is for some goddamn reason. A lot of people some people liked him because he had this aura of competence, if you will, because he was very much a professional, you know. And he knew certain minute tactical details, but you know, he becomes a corps commander. He doesn't do much. Then he becomes a wing commander at Fredericksburg. Completely fucks up there. And his attack is supposed to be the main attack at Fredericksburg, and it fails. And mostly because he only sends one division in. Which, think about that. Like, you're going to charge a corps. Would you send one division in? That's what he does.
Well, no, I would not, but I guess I'm not him.
You're not. Anyway, removed of command, sent out to Louisiana. He eventually takes command of 19th Corps. He is given the task of taking Sabine, Louisiana, Texas border area. So he has 5,000 soldiers in a fleet. They're confronting literally 50 Confederates in a mud fort. Anyway, those Confederates fought real hard, managed to sink a Union ship. Actually, managed to sink 2 Union ships. And Franklin could have landed his men and said, nah, it's all right. So in essence, he went into a battle where he had 5,000 men and got beat by 50. That's essentially what happened.
How?
I mean, William Franklin is the personification of timidity. You know. So that's William Franklin for you. He fucked up really bad at Fredericksburg. He was defeated at Sabine Pass. Humiliated is probably the best way to put it. He did command 19th Corps in the Red River campaign. Didn't do very well there either. He's a complete
Banks?
military. I kind of like. I'm starting to think I like Banks a little more. The only thing is that Franklin didn't really have independent command. So when I call Banks like the worst commander in American history, technically there are worse generals, actually. I'm just talking about for the amount of
Responsibility.
if you will, responsibility, especially, but the amount of responsibility he has, he's the worst. But Franklin is a rank incompetent. And I can say for Banks, at least, that he was very brave and very determined.
All right, here's my new counter hypothesis. Banks would have succeeded brilliantly if he didn't have Franklin under him at the Red River campaign.
You know, if they make me write the Red River book, I'll let you know, okay? I'll let you know. I'll let you know if I come to the same conclusion, but he's a hard F.
Okay. So apparently he kept command after failing at that fort, too, of 19th Corps.
Yes, he did.
Good fucking God. Because, I mean, it's not like the Union was shy about firing bad generals. How the hell did he keep his job?
You know, I sometimes struggle to know why. It did help that he wasn't friends with Halleck, but he was friendly. And Grant liked him. So he got to keep his job a little longer in 1864 than he should have.
Okay, so speaking of this fort at Sabine, have you been there? Like, have you looked at this place?
No, I've never been there, no.
Because I sort of want to see it now. I'm just curious how the fuck that happened.
You mean, how does a Union fleet with 5,000 soldiers on transports get defeated by 50 Confederates in a mud fort?
Yeah, I really want to see that now. I don't understand.
Well, they sank 2 of their ships, and, yeah. I mean, you lose 2 ships, people get gun shy. You know what I'm saying?
I think that could be a good, if you want to do a short book, that would be an interesting one.
Who was the Confederate commander there? Dick Dowling. He was a
like a captain?
Irish tavern keeper. Yeah, like Captain Dick Dowling. He was an Irish tavern keeper.
Wow. So his knowledge of Guinness was enough to defeat a professional soldier.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Fuck.
Absolute disgrace.
That's got to be one of the low points in the entire history of the U.S. Army.
Yes, it is. I've heard it described as the most embarrassing operation of the Union war effort in the Civil War.
I'm inclined to agree. This is worse than when the Union tried to blow up that ship and knock down Fort Fisher with the shockwave.
Oh yeah, that's the plot Butler had for Fort Fisher. Yeah.
Yeah, this is dumber. This is worse. I mean, that was at least creative, and that was something that people had never tried before. Of course, it was a dumb idea, but at the time, going into it, maybe it didn't seem as dumb. But this, so you said he didn't have to even attack this fort. He chose to do it voluntarily, and then failed miserably, and it fucked up his whole campaign.
Yeah, the part that really gets me is where him and the second in command, which was Heintzelman, spoke and decided, you know what, we really can't land these troops. And I'm thinking, there's 50 dudes. Like, seriously.
Yeah, and after you've lost 2 ships, I would be really worried about losing my command. I guess maybe he knew something we didn't, but I feel like, come on, you can literally overwhelm this just by pure force. It requires 0 brain power to pull this off.
It really does require 0 brain power, and yet he lost.
For fuck's sake. All right.
Once again, hard F.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes. I wrote super F.
Yeah, man.
It's too bad my dog is named Franklin. Now I'm gonna have to bring this up to him next time he misbehaves.
Come on, don't be like William B. Franklin.
Yeah, exactly. Be more like Benjamin Franklin or Franklin D. Roosevelt. All right.
Or Franklin from Peanuts. I don't know, man.
Yeah, or Franklin the Turtle. Which I think is actually what my girlfriend named him after. I don't know. Anyway.
What's Franklin the Turtle?
Some cartoon from the 80s. I don't really know. I didn't watch it.
Okay.
Probably PBS.
Is it like David the Gnome? It's like David the Gnome or something.
Maybe. I don't know. Alright. Well, next up we have another guy you've already said is something of a failure. Erasmus Darwin Keyes.
Complete failure. Another F.
Wow,
Right
we're
away.
racking them up here.
Yeah, we are. Well, I mean, let's be honest. In the Civil War, there really weren't that many good corps commanders. These men weren't necessarily trained for this level of organization and tactics, and it showed during the war. So both the Union and the Confederacy mostly had bad corps commanders, I must say. Keyes, though, is a special kind of fuck up. That's for sure. Yeah, so anyway, he was commander of 4th Corps, appointed both because he didn't like McClellan, and he was also a Winfield Scott protege. He was actually on Scott's staff when the war started. Anyway, so Keyes was appointed commander of 4th Corps. He did very poorly in that job. So much so that when the Union Army was transferred away from Richmond to northern Virginia, which leads up to Second Manassas, they leave Keyes on the coast. He does very poorly there, and eventually is removed from command and never given anything else. Yeah, that's pretty much it. He's bad.
Well, I mean, at least they didn't keep him around the way they did with Franklin.
Very true, very true. At least with Keyes, they were smart enough to be like, you know what, we're not going to give you that much responsibility. Okay, we'll give you another job.
And what, you hustle supplies behind the lines.
Yeah.
We'll make you a high-ranking stevedore.
Go, look, go be an administrator, okay? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Fill out these forms. Okay. So next up we have one of the more unfortunate looking of the Union commanders, John McAllister Schofield, famous for, among other things, the Battle of Franklin. Ironic. Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though he was barely in command there. So Schofield was a Halleck protege. He was given command of the Union war effort in Missouri. He did very poorly there. He was then made commander of the Army of the Ohio. His only reason for getting that command is because he's friends with Halleck. As commander of 23rd Corps, he actually does decent in the Atlanta campaign. Probably his high moment is after Kennesaw Mountain when he exploits Johnston's weak left flank, and they're allowed to, it allows the Union to get around the army. And anyway, he is then given command of the Union forces in Tennessee. You mentioned Franklin. He was actually barely in command at Franklin. He was across the river and almost totally uninvolved. He commanded 23rd Corps at the Battle of Nashville. He did very poorly in that battle. He moved slowly. He constantly asked for more men, afraid he was going to be attacked in any moment. His Corps, 23rd Corps, loses less than 200 men during the Battle of Nashville. I mean, for a massive Civil War battle, that's insignificant, really. So he's pretty bad, I must say. He did do well in certain parts of the Atlanta campaign, but yeah, he's pretty bad all around. I give him an E.
Okay, that's about what I was thinking. From what I understand of Franklin, at this most recent battlefield I visited, it was more of a soldier's battle anyway, because basically the Confederates caught the Union pinned against the river, and then it was pretty obvious what everybody involved had to do, so commanders weren't terribly relevant in the battle to begin with.
Yeah, except for rallying troops or inspiring them to go forward for the Confederates. So you did have some Union generals who did very well at Franklin. Most famously, David Stanley rallied broken Union soldiers and led them into a counterattack, for instance. But I get what you're saying. What the general's doing is not quite as important in that regard.
I mean, this was a straight up fight.
Yeah, no. Franklin is definitely a soldier's battle. So would Shiloh, honestly. But yeah, so Schofield did nothing that great there, and more importantly, when he's in command of a corps at Nashville, he's bad. He's rather bad.
Is he the guy who later went to serve in Egypt?
No, he did not serve in Egypt. He actually became commander of the United States Army. His West Point speech is still hailed to this day. He actually wasn't a bad commander of the U.S. Army, to be honest. But anyway, he commanded the U.S. Army in the late 1800s. One of the things he was known for, was intriguing against Thomas. During Nashville. Being like, he's acting too slow. I'd attack right away. And even in his memoirs, he would write things about Thomas like, he attacked too slow. He even had one thing where he said, like, he wasn't smart enough to fully compute the way that soldiers march on a battlefield and to integrate that into his plans, which is moronic.
What does that even mean?
But he thought of warfare, I guess, in a very mathematical way. But one of the reasons Schofield hated Thomas so much was Schofield was about to be kicked out of West Point, and it didn't happen, but Thomas voted for his removal from West Point. So many people think it was just personal, really. But yeah, he's an E. He's not very good.
Okay, fair enough. All right, next up we have Horatio Gouverneur Wright.
Oh, great, another F.
Oh boy. God damn, I didn't realize... Because I mostly try to balance it in terms of putting some good people interspersed throughout these lists. I didn't realize we're going to have this sort of F concentration.
He's almost completely incompetent. He entirely has his position due to Halleck's friendship. That's it. Nothing else. He's literally Halleck's butt boy. He'll do whatever he says. That's pretty much it. He somehow finds himself in command of 6th Corps in 1864 in the Army of the Potomac. He does poorly at the Wilderness. He does poorly at Petersburg. He wasn't actually at Petersburg. He was at Bermuda 100 when they were trying to take Petersburg. He does very poorly there. Butler orders him to attack, and Wright says no. And, Wright was probably right in that regard, but his entire thing was like, nah, I'm not going to do it. And then he's at the Battle of Jerusalem Plank Road, and Meade's telling him advance, and he says, nah, I don't want to. And the Union is defeated in the battle. And Meade complains to Grant and says, I cannot control Wright. Which is one of the reasons why Wright and his whole corps transferred north to go deal with Jubal Early in the valley. Where Wright does a bit better, but maybe he did better considering that he was underneath Sheridan, who once again is a Halleck guy. He's like, yeah, we're both friends with Halleck. But yeah, the Meade stuff, it was disgraceful. Like, Meade is telling Grant, this guy won't even follow my orders. Like, he just won't do what I tell him to do.
I can't imagine Grant being in a position to tell the guy who won the Battle of Gettysburg, yeah, dude, doesn't work for me.
Yeah, that's what he told him consistently at the Battle of Jerusalem Plank Road. I have no respect at all for Horatio G. Wright. think he's a rank incompetent who entirely owes his rank due to friendship and nothing else.
Damn, okay.
Yeah, I hold H.G. Wright in the lowest. I hold him in. I have the lowest opinion you can have of a general on the battlefield that I have for H.G. Wright. That's what I have for him.
Okay. Well, our next general is John Newton.
Oh, good. We finally got a decent commander now.
Okay.
John Newton was good. He took over First Corps during Gettysburg. He did lead a corps off and on during the Western Theater campaigns. Very much professional, very competent, brave, good tactician, great strategic mind. I give him a B.
Okay. So, finally starting to fill out some of the higher spots here. I guess you had to go through a lot of bullshit before you get to the good commanders. So it seems like what the Union did, just trial and error.
When I looked at our list, like the order, I was like, "Oh my God, the real trash is up front."
Oh wow!
Tonight, I was like, oh, "God, we got some real garbage to get through before you get to some decent guys," you know.
All right. Well, next up, if I'm not mistaken, is William Henry French.
Oh, great, another F. French was like a pure alcoholic, if you will, like to the point where he would shake if he didn't have a drink that day. He briefly commanded a corps in 1863. His command was during, the Bristow Station mine run campaigns, completely incompetent. And when removed of command, was never given any other responsibilities. Everyone knew he was an alcoholic of the highest degree. He's a pure F.
So in theory, if he had somehow beaten the bottle or at least gotten it semi under control, do you think he would have been okay, or is there any way to know?
Nothing would indicate that to me. He also strikes me as a moron.
Oh, well, that's never a very good combo.
I mean, I say a moron. I mean, of course, the guy graduated West Point, so he can't be that dumb, right?
Sure.
But he's not very bright. He's not very bright, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, next up is Andrew Atkinson Humphreys.
A. Humphreys, one of the strictest disciplinarians in the Army of the Potomac. Very good division commander. Served as chief of staff to Meade during 1864, did well in that position. Given command of Second Corps, he did well there as well. Nothing exemplary, but he had a decent tactical mind, if you will, and he performed better at Corps command than most of these jokers. So I give him a C.
So, Second Corps, to be clear, that would have been Hancock's outfit after he left because of his wounds.
Correct. So he commanded Second Corps in 1865.
Okay. So I guess he didn't really have that many opportunities then because the war was damn near over.
Yeah, true. True.
Like Sailor's Creek
definitely.
and some other shit where the Confederates were just beaten before the battle started.
Yeah, well, especially at Sailor's Creek for sure. But his handling of Second Corps in those confrontations is very good, must say.
All right. Next up, we have John Alexander Logan. Is he an Ohio general?
He is Illinois.
Illinois, okay.
Southern Illinois, from the part they call Egypt.
Ah.
Yeah, so he is like the... he comes out of Southern Illinois. He waited to kind of back the Union cause until Fort Sumter, and even then he waited a little bit longer, which meant there were actual rumors that... Because before that, he was very much a doughface, pro-Southern Democrat. So there were accusations that he was going to join the Confederacy. Those accusations have neither been proven nor disproven, so I'll just stay neutral on that. But in some ways, it doesn't matter. In the end, he fights with the Union and fights quite well. Hard fighting commander, excellent at brigade and division. Logan eventually finds himself commanding a corps during the Atlanta campaign, does very well, briefly commands the Army of the Tennessee. back to Corps Command. He kind of held it against Sherman, though, that he never made Army Command when it should have been his. Which, I gotta be fair to Logan, it probably really should have been his command.
So I guess they took Logan McPherson over him, or who?
McPherson died. He chose Howard over Logan.
Ah.
Now, if you are to believe Sherman, he says that Thomas personally protested having Logan made an army commander, which is not entirely far-fetched. From what I have read, they had a cool relationship. Why that is, I don't know. Maybe because Logan had embraced the radical Republicans. Maybe Thomas just didn't like the guy. He kind of said to Sherman, if you believe Sherman, along the lines of, I can't really trust this guy. I don't know if I can work with him. So then Sherman chooses Howard, which Thomas approved of. Anyway, Logan was a very, very good Corps commander. He wasn't, as a Corps commander, though, he wasn't in too many battles where his skills were really being tested. If you know what I'm trying to say. Like, by the time he makes Corps command, the Union has major advantages, if you will. And not just that, it's not like he's a Corps commander in the opening of the Atlanta campaign, which means they're fighting Joseph E. Johnston, which means you're never being attacked, because Johnston doesn't attack. Except at Seven Pines. Otherwise, Johnston doesn't attack. So in that regard, Logan, while he does well, he's never truly been fully tested. But still, I'd give him a B. He was also really popular with the troops.
All right.
Probably the second, probably after him and Hancock are probably the two most popular Union Corps commanders I know of.
Interesting. All right. Next up is Francis Preston Blair Jr.
Member of the Blair family, very powerful political family in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s. Blair himself played an important role in keeping Missouri in the Union by essentially setting up Union clubs, if you will. He eventually is elevated to Corps command by Grant. Grant and Sherman both had a high opinion of him. He's sort of interesting in that regard, in that he is, his father's a Republican, but they're very much conservative Republicans. Some people, and also the radical factions of the Republican Party hated the Blairs, absolutely hated them. In fact, one of the deals that the radicals made with Lincoln in 1864 was essentially, we'll retract our support for John C. Fremont, who's running as a free soil candidate, if you'll fire Montgomery Blair from the Postmaster General position. That's how much they hate Blairs. Anyway, Blair did very well as a Corps commander overall. He commanded 15th Corps. Now, once again, you kind of have a situation like the gentleman we were speaking of earlier, Mr. Logan, where he's not being that severely tested, but he overall did very well. He's very popular with his men. I would say a C for him.
Okay. Also, like Cal, it seems like there were some standard poses for these portraits. And
oh yeah, definitely.
It seems like there's maybe, 2 or 3 different pose options? Like standing.
Yeah, I see.
Sitting, lean back, and then sitting ramrod.
The sitting ramrod or lean back is the one I noticed the most.
And a few just standing, but with the standing you can... It looks like you got the option of putting your hand in your jacket or just like leaning on something.
Oh God, so many of these guys put their hands in their jackets, right? What's funny is a lot of the Fs have got that. We got like Gilmore, Franklin, and Keyes are all like, yep, I'm going to do the Napoleon thing, even though I ain't Napoleon.
It's funny, one of my professors who was a Roman expert, he did that in his official portrait, but of course he didn't have a jacket. He was just wearing a shirt. And he tried to do the Civil War thing for some reason. It looks really odd.
Weird.
But
that's odd.
I imagine he thought of it at the very last minute and then just did it.
That is different.
Yeah. And because he retired, that'll be his portrait forever. So, that will last throughout the ages.
Are you telling me the department over there has like portraits of retired professors hanging up?
Well, on their website they list all their professors emeritus.
Interesting.
And then they do have old pictures of the department, so sometimes you'll see professors who have been around a long time. And there was one guy who recently retired, but he was a professor who also was an archaeologist. He started there in 1972, and it actually is amazing how little he changed over the years. Because the only thing that happened is his hair changed colors, pretty much.
Funny.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, he's like one of those people you could almost, because the quality of the film and everything changes dramatically from picture to picture, because they only take one like once a decade, and it just seems like you got the same guy in there photo bombing. Anyway, he also sort of pioneered online teaching, and he started it in the 90s so he could teach while in the field excavating. So he made videos in the late 90s. And he did so with late 90s technology. So if I've TA'd for him once, and in his class, you would see him transport through time over about a 20-year period. So sometimes he'd use super old videos. And I think at one point he mentioned, yeah, President Clinton just approved of a spending bill that might give more money to humanities. And then the next one is in his office from yesterday. So also he ages like 20 years between videos. I mean, it's fucking crazy. But he had all kinds of files he would use. And some of them would be so off the wall that you have to download a program to run the damn things. Because it would be some outdated file type. But it got a little chaotic toward the end. But he was a real pioneer in online teaching, make no mistake about it. Anyway. Some of what he pioneered, I would say, is what not to do. But I guess that's inevitable since he literally was one of the very first people to start doing it. Anyway.
Well, yeah. No, wait, no, like, when you're a pioneer, of course you're going to do stuff that shouldn't be done, right?
Yeah, and it's also sad, though, that he apparently never shared most of his best stories when he was teaching, because he actually did have some pretty epic stories that he would tell pretty much only the grad students. And if he had shared those stories with undergrads, he would have been ultra popular. Like there's one story where he was he led a team of students to dig, and some girls were getting harassed at a bar, so they called him, and he came in, and he literally rode his motorcycle through the fucking door, and then shouted out at the guys to fuck off, and then put the girls in the motorcycle and rode away.
Damn.
And then there was another time. What?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh no! And then he told us one time we were doing some sort of seminar, and he was the guest speaker. He was talking about how, but when he was in grad school, there would be some old dudes. Because I think he graduated in like the early 70s, late 60s. He said, yeah, there would be some old guys hanging around the department who would tell us that a lot of this scientific archaeology is a bunch of bullshit, and all you really need is a passport and a revolver.
Yeah, I remember hearing you say that on your thing, and I was like, damn, I like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was pretty cool. I never really got to work with him, though, because he was kind of on his way out by the time I started, and he was kind of notorious also for not checking emails, because I actually wanted to go on a dig, but he never responded to my email, which apparently was pretty common, and also he got dementia around the same time, so yeah, it kind of sucked.
But still, all you need is a passport and a revolver.
Yeah, no, that's
all you need.
That's the way to do archaeology, folks. Passport, revolver, set.
Because, yeah, you were talking about in that video about the Indiana Jones thing, where, of course, it's a bit of fantasy, but there's, like, some element of truth to it, with archaeology in that era, where it really is, like, the Wild West in many ways.
Yeah, and especially if you think about, like, the areas of Mesopotamia and Egypt, where you have an Ottoman governor, but then he's sort of at odds with the people he rules over because they're Arabs. So you've basically got four factions involved in any dig site. You got French and British people who try to compete for the best stuff. You've got the Ottoman governor, and then you have the locals who are Arabs. So it is basically a balance of power politics going on. And there are instances of, I think there's one thing I read about where it was either the British or the French were trying to escape up the Nile with something they had found. They got ambushed by the other side, but they got away because they enlisted the help of the locals who flooded the area. And of course, they had the numbers, so the other side doing the ambush had to fuck off. It's crazy. Like the the actual politics and scuffling that went on in the 1800s, especially in archaeology, are nuts. And then there's also this guy named Giovanni Balzoni. If you want an interesting story, just look him up. He was an Italian archaeologist slash treasure hunter from around the early 1800s. And that guy had a hell of a career. He started out as an acrobat, but ended up as a tomb raider. And also wrote a memoir, apparently, which sounds fascinating. And unlike what you would normally think of as an archaeologist, this guy was about 6'6", and apparently because he was so large, he broke into some tomb, and the ceiling collapsed, and he fell through and got buried in a bunch of mummies.
Damn.
Yeah. And then he got into all kinds of scuffles with authorities, but also became friends with one of the governors. I mean, yeah. Early archaeology was a lot of fun, but also you had a pretty good chance of getting shot. So, gotta weigh those things out, I guess.
So in that regard, yeah. So Indiana Jones, it's a fantasy, it's an exaggeration, but there's a kernel of truth there, as you said.
And also, he sort of represents when it started to become more professional. Because although he does a bunch of crazy shit, that's not what he intended to do. It's just what he had to do.
He does teach, that's right. He's got the class, and he's like, archaeology is a search for fact, not truth. If it's truth you're after, whoever's philosophy class is right down the hall.
Yeah. And so he's like a serious academic, but then at the same time he lives in this world where you're competing for artifacts with Nazis and crazy warlords who want to rip your heart out of your chest and shit like that. So
I think that's the best way to get an artifact, is to fight Molaram.
Yeah, or
Yes,
to
me.
Let a Nazi get eaten by a propeller.
That fucking propeller does dice that guy up, man.
Well, there's no other way
Real
to beat him. I mean, that guy was big.
He was. That's a pretty good fight, because he like punches him once or twice, and the guy's just not phased.
Yeah. Weight classes exist for a reason.
He does give him a bloody nose before the propeller eats him. Like, he really is like throwing punches, and the Nazi guy's like, God damn, that hurts. Anyway, I'm gonna kill you now, and then the propeller gets him.
Yeah.
Yeah, great stuff, man.
Yeah, it was a great movie and also just a great scene. My favorite one is still where he just rolls his eyes and shoots the guy who wants to sword fight him.
Oh yeah, I like how that guy, before he shoots him, has a giant grin too. Like he's all about it. He's like, yeah, finally I get to sword fight. It's like, nah, not really.
Yeah, no, you forgot. Passport and revolver.
That's all you need, sir.
Yeah, all you need, and that's why you need it, because you might be in the streets of Cairo and some guy might start twirling his sword and challenge you to a duel. So,
Just need a passport and a revolver.
Yeah. All right, well, our next general is Grenville Dodge.
This guy's a total piece of shit. Yeah, Dodge. Dodge was notorious for allowing his men to like essentially burn, rape, or do whatever they want. Really, he won Grant over though, and in large part because Dodge was good with railroads, so he was good at that logistical kind of stuff. It also helped that he was friends with Halleck. Anyway, Dodge then becomes a corps commander under Sherman. He does okay. What he's most kind of famous for with a lot of Civil War historians is his subordinate, Thomas Sweeney, punched him after the Battle of Atlanta. Sweeney was drunk, and he punched Dodge repeatedly and then chased him off, yelling like, the equivalent of, you're a goddamn fucking coward, come back and fight like a man. And Sweeney was definitely drunk, that's for sure. So, Dodge left and then preferred charges against Sweeney, and Sweeney was removed of command. But Dodge wasn't very good. I'm not going to give him an F, though, because he wasn't like a rank incompetent, but he's definitely an E.
Is he related to Colonel Dodge, the famous writer of the books on Alexander, Hannibal, and Caesar?
To my knowledge, no.
So basically, his most memorable moment was losing a fist fight to a subordinate.
Yes.
In some ways, that's the most pathetic thing I've heard about anybody on this list.
Well, you know what his main accomplishment was is that he was a key engineer in the Transcontinental Railroad. Once again, he is a brilliant railroad engineer. Like if this was like tier ranking of railroad engineers, he'd be like an A or an S, really.
Just another one of those cases where a lot of these men are men of ability, just not in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, like I would say this thing of Thomas Crittenden, John McClernand, and most certainly Grenville Dodge. Hell, Nathaniel P. Banks is a man of ability and intelligence, just not the position he has. That being said, I think Alexander McCook is just incompetent in general.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Quincy Gilmore. If you were doing a pure engineering list, Gilmore's an A or an S. He's just not a corps commander. Brilliant engineer. Brilliant engineer.
I guess that was the problem with West Point back then. It was basically an engineering school, and then the people had the command infantry afterwards, and kind of like fish out of water in some cases.
That was kind of what. That's kind of what Thomas Jefferson was going for with West Point, though. Of course, was the idea that it would be an engineering school, that they wouldn't emphasize things like military tactics. And the idea was that, of course, if it's an engineering school, any one of these people can be an engineer for building X, Y, or Z. And so, in that regard, West Point, it's definitely a military academy, but mostly what it is before the Civil War is one of the premier engineering schools in the world. And that's on purpose, as the way it's designed.
Makes sense given Jefferson's view of the world and the relationship between the military and the government.
Yeah. He would prefer the military could fulfill a non-violent function, if you will, which essentially means engineering.
So I guess in some ways the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer, when it engages in major building projects, that's kind of the Jeffersonian vision come to life.
Yeah, actually, in many ways it is. You know, even if Jefferson wasn't as big on the government doing internal improvements necessarily, he at least wanted West Point to be a place that would be creating men who would build America, as opposed to conquering other countries.
Well, let's see if our next gentleman built anything or conquered anything. And we're talking about Newton Palmer.
Oh God, I have almost no opinion on this guy. Ah, shit. How the hell did he get on here? Did I put him on here?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know how else he would have gotten on here. I've never heard of this man in any context, so I didn't put him.
I feel like it must be a mistake. I mostly know him because he commanded the cavalry at First Manassas, at First Bull Run. Outside of that, he commanded 18th Corps for a bit. I'm sorry, he shouldn't be on here. Let's forget about him. He never led a corps into battle, as far as I know.
Okay.
Like into a major battle, maybe a skirmish. Let's ignore Palmer. Sorry for the mistake there. Okay, who's next?
Yeah. Apologize to all the Palmer fans out there.
Yeah.
Next up, according to my list, I have him scratched out, but it would have been Charles Woods. But I can't be. So maybe Frederick Steele.
Yeah, Frederick Steele has kind of a long-looking beard, if you will.
Okay, so he must be someone else. How about William Emery?
Emery's, I think, the last guy you have.
Okay.
Steele would be at least the list I'm looking at is he's the third man. He has a fairly long beard and he's looking dead at you.
Okay, so that can't be him. We also have.
Let me see.
He's not Ord. Is he Granger, or is Granger the guy between Steele and Ord?
Granger's between Steele and Ord.
Okay.
So yes. So there's Steele. He commanded a division under Sherman and Grant. Both of them liked him. So he eventually became the commander of the troops in Arkansas, commanding what was known as 7th Corps. He was in charge of what was called the Camden Expedition, which was to support the Red River Campaign. They didn't do very well. Kind of got their asses kicked. Steele then commanded a corps in the Mobile Campaign. Steele's a D. really. Nothing exemplary, but not really that competent. The one time he was given his own mission, he didn't do that well.
Real steel.
Yeah. Although, fun fact about him, big animal lover. There's a photograph I saw of him on his horse with a bunch of dogs around him.
Oh, it's kind of like Charles Lee energy.
Yeah, Charles Lee. He was all about those fucking dogs, man.
How about Gordon Granger?
Excellent commander overall. Gordon Granger's problem was he was very prickly, and he pissed off a number of his contemporaries, most importantly Grant. Granger was also very much a drunk. But when I say prickly, there's this one thing. He was friends with John Pope, and there's two fun stories about that. There's one in Missouri before they go to besiege New Madrid and Island Number 10, where Granger's like, look at this, it's the best damn regiment of cavalry I've ever seen. And then, Pope's like, yeah, sure. And then he's like, God damn it, you son of a bitch, that's the best goddamn regiment you've ever seen. My favorite one is that when Pope leaves to go to Virginia, Granger walks up to him at the train and says, goodbye, John. Your grave has already been dug.
Wow.
Yeah. So very blunt man, which I like about him. But he's an excellent commander. He leads a corps at Chickamauga and does superb there. Does well at Chattanooga. Grant was annoyed with him. I don't really see any problems with him, honestly. He then helps bottle up he helps in the blockade of Mobile, which comically enough, Grant was writing letters being like, don't put him in command, he can't do anything. Anyway, he did it masterfully. I would give Granger a B.
Okay.
Yeah, his main I mean, he's not a genius. His main problem though is just a personality thing. He can be a bit prickly. But otherwise he's an excellent corps commander.
Okay. And now we move on to somebody you promised would be a real trip. Edward Otho Cresap Ord.
Yeah, Ord was a hardcore pro-Southern Democrat. Like in the early months of the war, he wrote letters to Jefferson Davis being like, I can't believe the North wants to conquer the South. This is awful. Those letters, by the way, were discovered. But they were suppressed because Ord's friends with Halleck. They got suppressed. Ord is a very brave man under fire, and he's a good administrator. How is he as a corps commander? I would say pretty god-awful. He doesn't attack at Iuka. Now, granted, Iuka, he's waiting to hear the sound of battle. That doesn't happen. But he must be accused of some pretty extreme inertia there. Fails to trap Van Dorn at Hatchie Bridge. He was given command of 13th Corps in the Vicksburg campaign. There wasn't much to that. Well, at the end of the Vicksburg campaign, essentially when it's over, if you will. One of the things about Ord, too, was he was going to be given a command in the Shenandoah Valley, but then he faked an illness to avoid the command because he didn't want it. Yeah, anyway, then he was given command of the Army of the James. Ord's an E. He's not really that great.
His
Honestly,
picture looks a little bit like our old friend Lee.
He does. You've said this before, though. We had him on another list, and you were like, he looks like Lee Anderson.
He does, though. I just imagine him telling a story about how I was on a boat writing poetry, drinking whiskey, having women over.
I was in San Francisco Harbor, 1980.
Yeah.
I was on a boat, writing poetry, and having women over. And I'm thinking to myself, Lee, you're a great man.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of funny. They would tell that story like they were making fun of him, but I was like, sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, also, I mean, if you live on a boat and you write poetry and you don't have much money and you still get women to come over, you're doing something right.
Well, having the boat really helps in the getting women over part. It really helps, Do you want to take a short break to get something and then answer Super Chats?
Sure, sounds good. We can take a fiver and then come back and complete this list of superstar commanders.
God, they're such geniuses, man. They're such geniuses.
Yeah. Well, I guess to be fair, I mean, there were also some real masterminds on the Confederate side, too. I remember that list with Polk and some of those other guys.
Oh yeah. Oh god, that I mean that's bad too. I honestly, the Civil War to me, I think you had some good army commanders, and you really had particularly good brigade and division commanders, like excellent for the era. Honestly, it just that corps commander level was just really hard to master during this war, and not many of these men were that good at it. Now, I will be fair though. Most of the men who we've said are good, by the way, like like Stanley, Hancock, Smith, Thomas, they were not only good, they were superb at it and were decisive in many ways in winning the battles where they were at corps command. Whether it be Thomas at Stones River, Stanley at Franklin, A.J. Smith at the Battle of Tupelo. So I will say that the corps commanders for the Union, while they're mostly bad, the ones who are good are damn good.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll
But yeah,
take
let's take a quick break.
All right. Be back in a few.
Word.
back.
Hey, man.
Okay, so let's go through some of these super chats then.
Yeah, sure thing. Go ahead.
All right, CS Ventura, $4.99. Thank you, Mr. Ventura. Don't mind me just shilling for a great war generals/factions list. Remember, Hotzendorf may be awful, but Cadorna is god awful. Yeah, no, he really is. I read a book about the Italian front recently, and Cadorna, it's really hard to believe sometimes just how bad he actually was. And that is one, if we do that, I will have to go back through all of my notes I took on Cadorna, because there's some amazing stuff there.
I would wonder, why was he so bad insofar as, does he represent some part of the Italian military at that time?
So, basically he is part of an emerging military aristocracy. So, the Piedmont conquered the rest of Italy, and the ruling dynasty of the Savoys. So, his dad was a high-ranking general during the Wars of Unification, Raphael Cadorna. And because of that, Luigi's career was made from the outset. Now, that's not to say he didn't work hard or whatever, but he kind of was set up for success from the very beginning. And they also had some pretty fundamental debates about how to integrate the various parts of Italy into a nation, how to forge military tradition, and how to set tactical doctrine. And because of Cadorna's name, and then also his high rank eventually, he became a key figure in determining what their tactics and doctrine would be. He was second in command effectively for a very long time because he got beaten out by a rival for supreme command in 1908. And he was about to retire, but then two things happened. It was 1914. His rival died of a massive heart attack. He takes over. And then he's responsible for Italy's strategy for basically all of the war up until Caporetto. So, when I say he's responsible for the strategy, keep in mind what I mean by this. He can basically do whatever he wants. He probably has more freedom of action than any other commanding general in the war. And he does exceptionally little with it. And what he does do is almost all incompetent, unaccountable, and he learns exceptionally little from each battle. He'll make very, very small adjustments between battles, but he doesn't learn a fuck of a lot, given compared with even like what the boneheads on the Western Front are learning. Even compared to them, he comes off looking very bad. Even some of them, actually, one of the conditions of France and Britain's intervention after having observed Luigi Cadorna is they say, if you want us to bail you out after Caporetto, one of our conditions is Cadorna's got to leave as chief of staff. Because if we send in troops to help him, he will fuck this up somehow.
Yeah, also he'd become such a hated commander by that time, too, because of the harsh punishments.
Yeah, and he also had the newspapers completely pumping him up and calling him a military genius all the time. Yet he was killing men left and right. He killed more men than any other faction, including the Russians.
Yeah, definitely. God, it's shocking how many soldiers they executed. You know?
And a lot of times it was for some pretty minor shit, too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, there were instances of, like, if somebody came back late from leave by one day, then they would say, oh, you're a deserter. We're going to shoot you. Well, if I was a deserter, why would I be back a day late? Why wouldn't I just stay gone? But it's like shit like that. It happened a lot. And also, anytime somebody might say something at the front which seemed seditious in the hearing of a zealous officer, that could lead to a death sentence, sometimes for large groups of men. Just nutty. But yeah. No, Cadorna's in the running for worst general of all time. I would have to look to find some other contenders, but he's got to be in the running for that.
I mean, he's my pick for worst, so we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. All right. You should know, $5. Hey, Sean, how do you think Biden's presidency will end the way things are going right now?
I don't know. I've followed it to a degree. I've been reading more up on the domestic terrorism stuff they've been going into lately. But I really don't know. I suspect he'll finish his first term, but not run for the second. And I don't know if they'd hand it off to Harris though, because she's not particularly popular. They've given her a lot of crappy tasks, and what they've given her, she hasn't done very well with. So I don't think the vice presidency has really improved her profile necessarily. Which I wouldn't say the same for Hillary, even though I thought Hillary was a really overrated Secretary of State. It did definitely improve her profile. I'll say that. I just don't see where the vice presidency's improved Harris's profile. So I don't think Biden runs in a few years, but I also don't know who replaces him really. You know, I mean, obviously Harris will give it another go for sure. What do you think?
In terms of how his presidency will end, a lot of it will ride on this infrastructure bill. If they end up only doing the reconciliation bill and it's 1 trillion or whatever, then that will be sort of a disaster. It's amazing to me that Biden hasn't been able to push this a little more forcefully and use the bully pulpit, because the 3.5 trillion number is over the course of a decade, and if you average it out by year, we're talking about half what we spend on the military each year. So to me, this is just yet another example of Biden being weak, and his own party, in this case, especially Sinema and Manchin, are leading the way. There are some people who are a little quieter about it, but basically the same, who are following along. His own party, the faction he belonged to back when he was in the Senate, really fucking him over. It's
interesting. It's interesting you say this because I think that they've really made Manchin the point man for. I mean, a variety of senators who are Democrats don't actually want the bill. From what I've heard, Chuck Schumer is not really all that into it. But
make
they
your
know
donations
that,
today.
But they know that Joe Manchin can talk shit about it and everything and get away with it. You know, that he can get away with talking about how bad the bill is for him, like why he's not going to vote for it, because he's not getting primaried. And the Democrats know that as soon as he's gone, they lose that seat. It'll become Republican. So, they're willing to make him the point man for a variety of senators who really aren't that interested in it. But yeah, the 3.5, that's dead. It looks like.
Yeah.
I say that. I mean, something could happen. They can make some maneuvers to make it go through for sure. But I think it's dead. What it looks like to me. I never thought it would pass anyway, though.
Yeah, because I remember there was a expiration date on the 3.5 bill, and then basically the agreement is if we can't get this through by a certain date, which is rapidly approaching, then we'll go with the much lower version. And so I thought to myself, yeah, that's probably the one we're going to end up with then.
Yeah, it doesn't help that you got a lot of things going on. You have the fact that you mentioned, of course, that Mitch McConnell's idea is like, hey, don't let the opposition ever pass a bill, right? Because it makes them look good. On the other end, the 3.5 infrastructure thing, I think a lot of people thought like, oh, bridges. And they're like, no, there's a whole bunch of other stuff tied to it. Which I'm not here to say that I'm against or for. I just mean that the idea that this is purely an infrastructure bill is a misnomer. So I think all of that really undermined it in many ways. And also, it's not like you mentioned bully pulpit. It's not like Biden's really making that great of a case for it to begin with. So, how this presidency ends, I don't know. I don't have an optimistic view of it, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, next up we have Modern Guru for $10. Thank you, Modern. Did you see the dress Cortez wore? $35,000 ticketed event for elites and the ability for elites to bribe these idiots. And she wears a $20,000 dress with tax the rich on it. God, I love the American circus.
Oh man, you gotta like that.
Yeah,
A $20,000
I
tax
didn't know the
rebate.
dress cost that much. I thought it was just some random bullshit that she wrote on. I had no idea how the dress was made. But I think it is funny somebody bought her a ticket to that, though.
Yeah, I didn't know about this. What was the deal?
So she showed up to a gala, which again was just a fundraiser for some very, very rich people. And then she wore a dress, and it said "Tax the Rich" written across it. And then she was displaying it on the carpet. No one expected her to show up, by the way. But she had a ticket and showed up and wore the dress, got it in the press. There was a big kerfuffle over this. A lot of people were angry. Predictably, the Republicans were angry. They said it was a stunt and it was uncalled for and inappropriate, etc. Apparently, Joe Scarborough, surprisingly enough, was a big fan, though. He thinks that she made a really good point. And he went on a rant about it.
I could see him thinking that. That's not too surprising, you know. I mean, yeah. I mean, she's very much a partisan figure, so depending on how you vote, within parties even, will determine how you feel about something like that.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, it seems fine to me. I guess this is the cynic in me. I kind of feel like with issues like that, there's essentially something performative about the Democratic Party with issues like that. I kind of feel like she was just doing a bit more of the performative stuff. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case it is purely performative. It's kind of funny, but it's not really that important. It's like one of those things. Oh, that should be on the news in the evening, and then we should never talk about it again because it's not that important. But like a lot of the people who make money off of hating her have talked about it for about a week. So.
Oh yeah. Why do you think hating her is such a minor industry, if you will?
I feel like, both sides try to find figures that they can attack consistently that represent what they hate about the side that they're against. They need like a negative avatar. So for the left, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a great one, and who's the drunk guy from Texas? Louis Gohmert. He's perfect. So those are perfect examples of people the left can beat up every week. And then AOC kind of serves that function for the right, even though she is way more competent than, say, Louis Gohmert, who's always fucking wasted when he speaks.
That's the thing, though, is that I think one of the things that undermines her in a way, at least from what I've seen, is that she's not terribly bright. You know, so when I've seen her in a more committee setting, if you will, she just seems stupid and out of her depth. But she's really good at the social media stuff, you know, and things like this kind of stunt.
She's got her strengths and weaknesses. I mean,
she has her strengths. Her strengths are more like this, I would say, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I miss Michelle Bachmann. What can I say?
Yeah, she's retired, I guess.
She was great, though. I loved Michelle Bachmann. I mean,
she's been replaced by people who are actually crazier. MTG is probably crazier.
Oh, definitely. They just don't have her her charm and her insane. Like I don't know, just like Michelle Bachmann. Like I mean, she looked nuts. It was great.
Well, I think it's partly the reason why Michelle Bachmann was so much fun for everybody is because Minnesotans seem very friendly and approachable. So it's like she's somebody you would feel comfortable making fun of, kind of, and you just feel like if you made fun of her in public, she'd probably take it well, and everything would be fine. And it was kind of like sporting in a way.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things you don't really see it as being terribly insidious that she's a crazy person. It's just kind of one of those things like, yeah, you obviously have a gay husband, you're the only person who doesn't get it, and I don't know, I feel like that would be fun. There was something about Michelle Bachmann that was kind of whimsical and fun. I don't know.
There was. These people are not whimsical or fun. They're depressing. Anyway.
All right, well, next up is Oscar Palacios for $5. Thank you, Oscar. Do you believe that the correlation of mama's boys and huge historical figures, how do you feel about the European politics being more nationalistic? So you mean like the correlation of major historical figures growing up as mama's boys? Um, well, I don't know. I mean, I know Alexander was sometimes accused of that, but I don't think he really was a mama's boy because he never came home after he went to Asia. Trying to think who else would be a major mama's boy who was a huge success.
I mean, if we're talking like, I mean, from what sources we have, I guess Genghis Khan and Napoleon.
Yeah, although, I mean, with Napoleon, I mean, he continued to function without his mom on campaign all the time. It was fine.
Right, but he was. I mean, he was. Mom had a lot of influence, and he definitely like respected and drew more from his mom than his dad for sure. I
Yeah,
mean,
because
I don't know.
grew up in a single parent household because his dad died really early.
Fairly early, yeah, and also dad was a lot. Dad also spent a lot of time with the court of Versailles, but no, I don't know. I'd read a study some years back that said one of the highest correlations of how successful you'll be in life is how much of a positive relationship did you have with your mother.
That's interesting.
You know, yeah, I see a lot of evidence for that personally. So I don't know. I don't know about huge historical figures necessarily, but I think there might be something there.
It's possible. I think especially it probably is helpful if you have a positive female role model in your life for trying to get along with and win support from women.
That could help. But just the general, like, you have a positive relationship with your mother, you're going to feel more, you know, I guess like securing yourself in the world, if you will.
Yeah,
Doesn't
that
mean
makes
you won't
sense.
like. It doesn't mean you won't necessarily like want to do X, Y, or Z to change the world or take your own stuff. But yeah, you're just going to feel like you have a baseline. I don't want to say backup, but like a kind of baseline security, if you will. Whereas if you don't, you have a terrible relationship with your mother, then for you the world is like a chaotic shit show. I guess maybe.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of throwing stuff out here.
makes sense. I guess also it makes you feel more like you have a sense of home or belonging because you have this connection with a close relative and
Yeah.
feel a little more grounded or secure. But also, how do you feel about European politics being more nationalistic? I guess, do you mean
Well,
in the recent past, or...
Well, I think right now with let's say Hungary and Poland and nationalist party in France is rather popular. The Marine Le Pen variety, if you will. I did read a thing that made an interesting case that a rise in nationalism is always a sign that an empire is dying. You know,
Hmm.
and so many of these countries fall under the American Empire.
Yeah.
And the American Empire, it's a weird empire for sure, but it's definitely an empire. But if you have a variety of countries going a nationalistic route, they're essentially telling the imperial core, "Fuck off. We're going to do what we want to do. We're going to do what we think is best for the nation according to X, Y, and Z." So I think that's what a lot of it has to do with the rise of nationalism. And yeah, because I think about it, nationalistic movements get really popular with the Soviet Union as it collapses. They get really popular within the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I mean, the end of the great empires of Europe, right? Like France and Britain and Portugal and all the rest. I mean, they're destroyed by nationalistic movements in Africa. That's how the empire dies.
Yeah.
So
Also, speaking of nationalism, I mailed you a book that is supposed to come around tomorrow that deals with this topic.
okay,
I thought it was a really good book, but I think you'll like it a lot more than I did, even. And Danny will
it's
also
not called
really like it. What?
it's not called Imagine Communities, is it?
No, it is not the Benedict Anderson book.
God, I do not like that book.
Yeah, I don't either, really. But
I
it,
remember that in class. You were like, this guy hasn't read ancient history. He doesn't
yeah.
know it because he
Although,
was saying things like the ancient had no conception of time, and you're like, what?
interestingly enough, my advisor at OSU actually does really like that book.
I
But
think there's some points in the book for sure. I just, I think it was one of those thesis-driven books where whatever doesn't conform to the thesis has to be discarded. You
yeah,
know?
so I don't know, because I've never really talked to my advisor about this book in depth, but I guess maybe I should sometime. I don't know, because I'm kind of curious why he likes it so much. But then again, he's really into like big picture, broad scope kind of stuff. So that could be part of the
Uh,
reason, but I don't know. But
are,
anyway, your book will arrive probably tomorrow. It is called Why
okay.
Nationalism, and effectively it makes a case for why the left, or I guess in her case, more like liberals in the more traditional sense rather than the left, should embrace nationalism in order to defeat the right wing version of it.
Oh God, that ain't happening.
Well, yeah, I don't think so either. But she actually makes a fairly good case. Now, whether she can convince anyone with it because of how much people on the left tend to really hate nationalism, well, yeah, probably not. But she does make a pretty good case nonetheless.
Yeah. I do want to mention one thing about Imagined Communities. I actually really like the introduction to the book, where he talks about China invading Vietnam and Vietnam invading Cambodia,
Mm-hmm.
because he was making a case that it showed that nationalism was stronger than communism. Because according to if we're to believe in a communist theory, then the entire world's supposed to go over to communism, right?
Yeah,
So in that way, communist countries shouldn't be fighting because aren't they all supposed to be on the same Marxist revolutionary page? But they're not.
right.
You know, I I did
Was
I did think the introduction was pretty good.
It's
Can't
actually a
say
similar argument to what Tamir makes in the book I sent you.
okay, yeah.
Um, all right, next
Well,
up.
let's just say like, hey, as beaten down as nationalism is by some people, at this point it's definitely got a way more cred than communism.
Yeah.
Like that is dead as go, man.
All right. Well, next up is Nerve AMV Maker for $10. Thank you, Nerve. Given that it pitted arguably the two most well-known generals in U.S. history against each other, why isn't the Overland Campaign as popularized as battles like Gettysburg and Shiloh?
That's a great question in terms of Civil War history. Thank you, Nerve AMV Maker. Um, I would say that a big part of it is because, in a way, neither general comes out of it looking that good. Lee wins most of the battles in 1864. So if you're going with the whole like Grant's military genius thing, well, you're a bit subverted, or you got to make excuses, which they do all the time. I mean, at this point, people are now making it sound like Cold Harbor was barely a defeat. At this point, however, you're just making excuses. He loses a lot. At the same time, though, Lee's entire thing is keep them away from Richmond and the James River. So Lee does get pinned down. And in being pinned down, there's a lot of evidence to show that Lee's morale, if you will, is shot throughout the Petersburg campaign. It's very up and down. Like, so for instance, a few days after winning the Battle of Petersburg itself, I mean, Lee is essentially all but telling the authorities in Richmond, hey, I can't hold this place for very long. So I think what happens is that the Civil War in general, the battles of 1862 to 1863 get more of the attention. The soldiers prefer to remember those battles. Those are the battles that are less modern. They're more in the Napoleonic mode, like fighting an open field type stuff. And at the same time, the 1864 battles, they are bloody, they are grueling, and it actually doesn't make either general look as good as they would like it to be. Where it's like something they wish they could forget, if you will. You know.
So I guess
So
if
I think
they
that
really
plays.
emphasize those, wouldn't pretty much all the letters and diaries in that period be super depressing?
They are super depressing. Like they really are. Like the Union letters from 1864 are they're horrible. They're just talking about how everybody's dead or wounded or gone. And they're very angry too. A lot of the letters and diaries of that era are just angry, just like Grant's an idiot. We've wasted this many lives, and for who, for what? You get a lot of that. One of them was Colonel Wainwright has a good memoir. He was the artillery chief for the Fifth Corps, and he says all Grant does is push his pieces forward like a chess player who doesn't know what he's doing. That's what he says. But yeah, no, the letters they're angry and despondent and depressed.
Well, I guess that could be the reason then. Alright, another one from Modern Guru for $10. Thank you, sir. Totally unrelated, but you guys talk about video games a lot. I've never heard you guys say anything about Rome Total War. I found it off Steam during COVID and wasted my life since. Well, actually I have played Rome Total War, not in a long time, but I think I do have it on my computer. The original one, I mean. And I mostly got it again because I was trying to play the Alexander expansion.
Oh, yeah.
And the Alexander expansion fucking blows. Fucking blows. Because he just randomly dies. For no reason. And the gameplay is too slow to simulate his campaign. There's no way to get him anywhere before he just dies of mysterious causes.
Crazy, man. So you're telling me they didn't test the game, is what you're telling me.
I don't know what the problem was, but I know it doesn't work right. And also, Alexander only starts out as about a 3-star general. Where in a game we can go up to, I think, 9 or 10. So, yeah, obviously he didn't prove himself at first to the same extent that he would later, but 3 stars? I mean, really? I think that's the one where they said that only children and girls take you seriously when you issue commands, if you read the description of it. So, it's like, come on, Alexander did lead the charge that won the Battle of Chaeronea. And he would quickly campaign against the barbarians in the north, destroy them utterly, destroy the city of Thebes, and then invade Asia, and go from there. So how was he only 3 stars at the beginning? And because of the game speed, there's no way to simulate the speed of Alexander's campaigns. So usually when he dies of, whatever he died of at age 32, 33, you're barely getting out of Turkey at that time if you're hauling ass.
Wow.
So
I
doesn't
never
work.
played the Alexander expansion. I heard the Barbarian one was solid, but of course the core game was the one I played a lot after Hurricane Katrina.
And the core game is very good.
A lot. Yeah, I loved that, man. However, if you were say playing the Carthaginians, if you simulated a battle, you always lost. So you had to fight every battle as Carthage.
Yeah, a lot of times.
They're all winnable. They were all winnable though, as long as you had a good cavalry force. You could actually. I think I must have repeated Cannae over and over again in that game. Because the Romans, they would just be like, let's throw our hastati at them. I'm like, all right, well, we're just gonna work around those flanks in the rear and we'll kill them all, which we did. But yeah, great game, loved it.
Well, one problem with the battles in Rome Total War, and it's a problem I also see in Medieval 1 and 2 as well. You don't have to know anything about how battles work. There's a way to avoid doing any work in those battles and still win. And that is what I like to call blob and bash. You just take all your men as a big clump and hurl them in. And you will probably get about the same results as if you carefully place your units.
That's interesting. We had a heavy, at least for the I think what you're talking about with Rome Total War, you could definitely do with Rome pretty easily. But when we played Carthage and Parthia, me and my brother would, mass our cavalry on both flanks and simply work the flanks in the rear. And we'd have battles where we'd lose 50 guys and they'd lose 1,000, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, it probably works with them a lot better, but I mean, for the most part, it's, I mostly played with Rome, and then it seems like every fucking time I'd get to where I could unlock another faction, I wanted to play as the other factions, so I unlocked Carthage, started playing as them. I was on the verge of victory, and then my old computer crashed, so I've never actually beaten Rome Total War, but I was very close. Man. But yeah, every time I've gotten one of those games close to victory, then I have a computer crash. Similar thing with Medieval 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's part of why I mostly play on consoles, because when it comes to PC gaming, my luck has been very poor when it comes to having my platform survive with my data. But anyway.
I see this.
So last super chat comes from Achaemenid Arsenic, which is a pretty cool username for
Def-
18 pounds, and would that be 70 cents or 70 pence or something British? How powerful was Prussia during its height in the second half of the 19th century? Was it capable of being conquered or conquering Europe like Napoleon, since they had a great strategist in Moltke?
Oh God, difficult question in that regard. I mean, technically, I guess they could have pulled that off, but if we're talking about Napoleon's era, though, it's very much one an era in flux. Two, the French army is vastly superior to its opponents. The Prussian army of that era is superior, but I think the not quite as superior as the French one, but still pretty damn superior, especially because of their repeating rifles, if you will. And of course, Moltke, like you mentioned, absolute military genius. The other thing, though, too, is that Prussia's not really looking at this time to conquer Europe. They're just essentially, Bismarck's working for German unification and trying to set up Germany as the strongest country in Europe, but not the way Napoleon did. I mean, Napoleon had an entire conception that's almost like the EU in a way, a kind of concert of Europe, just directed all by France. Bismarck doesn't have that, you know. So, anyway, pretty good question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I personally don't feel like they could have, just because I don't think they had the manpower pool, and Europe was still very built around the balance of power, so they would have drawn too many opponents, and ultimately,
Yeah, I would.
it would have
Definitely.
overwhelmed them.
Well, that's the thing too. Is like Napoleon doesn't care about the balance of power. That's why he's kind of doing what he's doing. He's like, balance of power. Who cares? I'm
Yeah.
going to do what I want to do.
I feel like
To set up my
Prussia could have
continent.
recreated Frederick the Great at that time, kind of, but that would have been about it.
They did though. Yeah, they
Yeah.
did. They did redo Frederick the Great with the. I mean, the Austro. Yeah, the Franco-Prussian War, the Austro-Prussian War. Both of those are very swift, decisive
I'd say
victories.
they did Frederick better than Frederick, though, because I don't know if they ever got attacked on all sides and then found themselves in some of the precarious spots that he did.
Yeah, I can see that. They did well. Also, Moltke was really using the railroads very effectively, and definitely the Austro-Prussian War. The Prussians have a decisive technological advantage in that they have repeating rifles and the Austrians don't. Now, the only advantage that the Austrians have in the Austro-Prussian War is breech-loading artillery. You know.
That's a pretty big one, but I guess it depends on the...
It's big, and the
situation.
Prussians were impressed enough to where they essentially adopted it as soon as the war was over. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, Prussian soldiers have repeating rifles, and they don't fight in super heavy, compact lines, if you will. So a little more dispersed, and especially when we get to the Franco-Prussian War, the lines for both armies are even more dispersed. You know. I thought about, with the horse and musket series that I was doing, I kind of debated, like, when did the horse and musket era end? And I chose 1866 with Prussia versus Austria. Because, on the one hand, the Prussians do fantastic with their repeating rifles, but at the same time, the Austrians obviously have the superior artillery. And very soon after that, almost every army in Europe has adopted repeating rifles and breech-loading artillery. So I kind of view 1866 as the end of that era.
That's interesting. Well, you want to get back to the Civil War, back to the last great horse and musket war, unless you want to count Austro-Prussian?
This is the last pure one. There were units with repeating rifles, especially towards the end of the war, but I would say it was not a decisive factor in the war's outcome. So, you know, it's kind of more like a novelty weapon that has a big effect on certain battles, is what I would say.
I mean, it's amazing to me that Ben Butler didn't win all his battles because he had a Gatling gun. Anyway,
I'm pro Gatling. What can I say?
I think it's pretty cool looking. Yeah, the Civil War model especially looked pretty damn cool.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, next up is, I believe, George Sykes.
Yeah. I love his nickname, Tardy George.
Ooh,
You like that?
that's rough.
Yeah. Sykes was a commander of the regulars at First Manassas, and he attained a solid combat reputation. He finds himself as commander of Fifth Corps at Gettysburg. Doesn't really do that great, but not incompetent. Same thing with his service in Northern Virginia. Eventually, Meade actually arranges for him to be removed, believing that he was too slow. And there's some decent evidence for that, although I think Meade might have been too quick to draw conclusions. But I would give him a D.
Okay. So, Tardy George, a little slow, but not horrific. And next up is, I know, someone that you have been very fond of for a number of years. It would be Nathaniel Banks.
I dislike him as a commander so much, or I have such little respect for him that I feel like I've come complete circle now to where I still think he's incompetent, but I kind of like him personally.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Well, I mean, he was a very brilliant and skillful politician, and in combat, extremely brave, and I would also say very determined. So once he would fixate on a goal in Louisiana, he would try to do it to the very end. So Port Hudson being the most famous example, because he could have gone to Vicksburg, or he could have panicked because of the warnings about New Orleans being attacked by Richard Taylor, and he doesn't. He says, I'll win here no matter what. So there is definitely a determination, a bulldog grip here. That being said, this man is incompetent. Beyond his bad tactics, one of his other problems too was he was inconsistent with the way he would treat soldiers. So he was very lenient about looting in Louisiana, and as a consequence, 19th Corps, which he leads, becomes notorious as a band of fucking pirates. So towards the end of the Bayou Teche campaign, he starts arresting men, like hundreds of soldiers, being like, "You guys are looting," and that really hurt morale because the men were like, "Wait a second, we thought you were okay with this," you know. And that kind of inconsistent behavior marks his entire career. It's one of the more limiting factors on what he can do, both militarily and actually politically as well. Is his willingness to change depending upon the circumstance. While it makes him politically flexible, it also means that he rarely builds up a kind of, for lack of a better term, reservoir of trust, if you will. So anyway, but he's incompetent. I give him an F.
Yeah, predictable. Did not see that coming.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't, huh?
Nope. I thought he was going to be at least a C, but I guess I was wrong.
Nope, Natty Banks.
All right. I think next up, if I'm not mistaken, it would be Darius Couch or Couch. However you say his name.
I know. I always used to say Couch, then I hear Cooch. Yeah, Cooch is interesting. There's a lot of animals named after him, by the way, like 4 or 5 of them. He was involved in a major expedition in the Southwest where he discovered a bunch of animals. So
yeah, apparently he's actually a very accomplished man, because he was one guy I looked up, and he's got a very different background than a whole lot of his fellow officers. I mean, he was not only a naturalist, but a really damn good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Also, he commands Second Corps in the Chancellorsville campaign, does pretty well there. What he's kind of most famous for in Chancellorsville was, he's getting shelled, and the officers were like, well, we're getting shelled here. He's like, yeah, we can draw their fire away from the men. So an extremely brave and relatively selfless soldier in that regard. He absolutely hates Joe Hooker. So essentially after Chancellorsville, he says, I want a different job. And Stanton really didn't like him because, for one thing, he's a McClellan guy. He's very much a Democrat. He wasn't willing to work with Hooker. And fun fact, he leads a division at Nashville and doesn't do very well in that job. But what's interesting is that when he's at Nashville, they purposely make him the commander of a division in 23rd Corps because otherwise he has to command a corps. And Stanton essentially says, I've sent Couch. He outranks these other two guys who have corps command, but I don't want him commanding a corps, so make sure he's in a division. So you got to think in his position, he's got to be like, wait a second. Like, there's two other corps led by my juniors in rank. What the hell am I doing? But anyway, he did well in his one battle. He's a very brave man. I definitely wouldn't call him an incompetent. I mean, this is not the second coming of William Franklin or William French or Nathaniel Banks. I give him a C.
Okay. Also, I have here in my notes that he was actually offered command prior to Gettysburg, but said no.
I've never run into that, but I wouldn't be surprised. I know Reynolds was offered command, and I want to say there was one other person offered command as well. And you're telling me Couch was offered command. I'd never read that, but that's not surprising. That also might explain some of Stanton's antagonism towards him. Like, you didn't take command, we offered it to you, you asshole, kind of thing.
All right. Well, next up we have, is that Alfred Terry?
That is Alfred Terry. Although this is when he was older. I think this was around the time of the Little Bighorn, the Great Sioux War, if you will. Anyway, Alfred Terry was not a professional. He's from Connecticut, I believe. Anyway, he very quickly moved to the ranks. Everybody recognized him as a natural soldier. He was very inspiring to his men. Decisive. I wouldn't necessarily call him like some kind of military genius, if you will, or even that competent necessarily. His real highlight is storming Fort Fisher. He's the guy who takes the place. So yeah, you have Terry, who is an aggressive, competent battle commander. Not brilliant, though, but aggressive and competent. Very inspiring. I see no reason not to give him a B.
Actually, that's the only context I know him in is the Fort Fisher campaign. I think he came in after Burnside and Butler left.
Yeah, after Butler was gone. After Butler's failed ship explosion, right?
Yeah. And then things instantly improved.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so I remember reading the book on Fort Fisher, and I get the impression that the Union command was a circus, and then Terry took over, and he just did some fairly obvious stuff, and it worked.
Yeah, I wouldn't call him a genius, but yeah, he is very much like, obviously you should do this kind of thing. That's very much what Terry is. I could see that for sure.
Yeah, as soon as he took over, that operation went really well for the Union, and they were able to remove the garrisons on the coast, and I think he was able to then link up with Sherman.
Yes, he was. Leading the 10th Corps from Wilmington, they link up with Sherman. He's involved in the Battle of Wise Fork, although I don't know how involved he is in that one. That's an interesting little battle. It's kind of a both sides lose battle. On the one hand, the Confederates fail to stop the Union, but they make an attack that's very well placed, and they manage to destroy an infantry brigade. So they inflict heavy losses on the Union, considering the duration of the fighting, but they ultimately don't stop the Union forces from continuing their advance.
Okay, well, next up we have David Bell Birney.
Yeah, born in Alabama to a notable abolitionist.
Huh. That's a weird
Well,
background.
yeah, the well before 1832, there were more abolition societies in the South than there were in the North, and most of them in the South were Quakers, if you will. But there was a lot of abolitionist societies in the South pre 1832. So what changed in 1832? Well, John C. Calhoun makes his whole slavery is a positive good argument, which is different than what Washington or Jefferson thought. They thought necessary evil, which means they still think it's evil. But no, Calhoun makes the positive good argument that gets very popular, and then you have the Nat Turner slave rebellion. So David Birney is born in Alabama. He doesn't live there that long. His family's essentially forced out, which is doubly interesting because David Birney doesn't, from my reading, doesn't really. He's not really an abolitionist general. Not that I would call him a conservative. He kind of seemed politically like a neutral, if you will. His brother William Birney, though, was very big on the abolition of slavery and ended up commanding black soldiers in the Civil War in a few battles, like New Market Heights and God, what's the other one? There was another one outside of Richmond, which was very much their detriment, by the way, because William Birney's incompetent, like really a bad general. Like he's F tier all the way. Anyway, so what about David? He ends up commanding Second Corps when Hancock gets ill. The Corps is mostly routed at the Battle of Jerusalem Plank Road on June the 22nd, 1864. That said, one thing that doesn't help is that Wright refuses to cooperate because Horatio Wright's, incompetent. Uh, David Birney, when Hancock returns, David Birney becomes commander then of 10th Corps, leads it fairly effectively at New Market Heights, but then becomes ill and dies. Uh, yeah, he's not one of the easier ones to rate, but I'd go the D on him. Yeah, he's not incompetent, but he's definitely not great. And Jerusalem Plank Road's pretty bad. As far as, I mean, to be fair, he's new to Corps Command. I would also say that at Petersburg, he becomes Corps Commander on June 18th, sorry, 1864, when the battle's lost, and all the other Corps commanders like Warren and Burnside are telling Meade, "Hey, we should stop." Birney's the only one egging him on. So one can make a case that a lot of the losses at Petersburg are because Birney's egging him on and being like, yeah, come on, we can storm these defensive positions, which they can't.
Damn. All right. Well, next up we have Ambrose Burnside, much better known for his time as commander of Army of the Potomac, but also a Corps commander.
And also really well known for that facial hair, right? Sideburns.
Yeah, no, that's a very distinctive look he has going there.
He does. He does have that. First president of the NRA, by the way. One of the founders.
Yeah.
That's really when it was all about, like, knowing how to shoot a gun and, like, being good at accuracy. It was kind of just an accuracy gun club, really, you know.
How to use your sights 101.
Exactly. So Burnside commanded Ninth Corps on the coast, North Carolina, early 1862. Then essentially commanded Ninth Corps at Antietam. Didn't do so great, but eventually finds himself commander of the Army of the Potomac. You know how that goes. He will return to the Army of the Potomac as the commander of Ninth Corps. Again, it was kind of an odd arrangement at first because Burnside technically outranked Meade, so Grant would give orders to Burnside instead of Meade. Eventually, though, they smoothed it out, and Meade would give orders to Burnside. He's not a very good Corps commander at all. One of the more notorious things about him was his tendency to delegate to the point of insanity, if you will. So probably the most infamous case of that is the Battle of the Crater. The black soldiers, the USCT, which is United States Colored Troops, had been trained specifically to storm the crater. And then, like a day or two before, Grant and Meade say you can't storm with them. Because they're thinking, because a lot of Confederate propaganda at the time, which was, it seems like it might have been a little bit effective, was the idea that the Union only wants you in the Army as cannon fodder, as nothing else. They don't care about your life. They just want you to join the Army and die, essentially. Die gloriously, if you will. So to dispel the rumors of that kind of stuff, Grant and Meade are like, don't send the black soldiers in. So Burnside at that moment could have been like, all right, I'll send in the division commanded by Robert Potter. That's his best division commander. Instead, he had his division commanders draw straws to see who would attack the
Ended
crater.
up with Ledley.
He did. But think about that. Burnside could have been like, yeah, Ledley's a moron. We're not doing this. But also, as a marker of his detachment, he spoke well of Ledley until the crater. So had him fooled, you know?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Ledley was drinking something that disguised the fact he was drunk. Like, maybe he's really good at disguising the booze breath.
The booze breath. Funny. Yeah, maybe. So no, that's the Burnside saga, if you will. He's really bad. He's a bad corps commander. I like the guy personally. Most people did, but he's not particularly good at his job. I don't know. I struggle between E and or F on an E or an F on him. I guess I got to go with F.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he is an F. I mean, I think some of these other guys sound dumber, but still, I think he belongs in their company.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the next guy up is John Park.
Oh yeah, often found himself in command of Ninth Corps actually. Yeah. Especially after Burnside was removed. Probably his finest hour is Fort Stedman in 1865, you know, when Lee attacks the lines at Petersburg. Park is the one in command where Lee's men break through for a minute, and Park helps direct the containment and the counterattack that wipes out the Confederate gains at Fort Stedman. Park was very much an engineer, not particularly inspiring by all accounts, but he appears to have been an effective and competent corps commander. Nothing spectacular, but at the same time, I would definitely rank him higher than a Franklin or a Banks or a fucking Ord as well. So I'd say a C.
Okay. All right. And after that, I'm not sure who the last guy is, but I think it might be William H. Emery.
It is William Emery.
Okay.
He's kind of an odd choice to be on here. He mostly just commanded a division in 19th Corps. No, that's right. He did command 19th Corps in the Shenandoah Valley. That's right. So William Emery was a solid division commander under Banks in Louisiana. He stays with 19th Corps and becomes their corps commander in the Shenandoah Valley. And what their 19th Corps is kind of notorious for, besides, well, I mean, they're notorious for a number of things. Like in Louisiana, they were a bunch of pirates who burned everything they could see. Also became notorious for rape in Louisiana. But anyway, in the Shenandoah Valley, 19th Corps at Cedar Creek gets overrun. And so the Federals have to try to rally their line, if you will. And then you get Sheridan's ride to Cedar Creek, where he rallies the men and they counterattack. It's all very dramatic, and to be fair, while Sheridan is definitely overrated, Cedar Creek is one of his best hours for sure. So I'm not a giant Sheridan fan, but yeah, he kicks ass there. Well, to Emery's credit, both him and Wright actually. This is Cedar Creek's also probably Wright's best hour. So him and Wright did a very good job reforming the Union forces that had been routed, and getting them prepared for the counterattack that Sheridan led. Yeah, Emery is not spectacular, but most certainly not incompetent. Just decent military commander overall. I'll give him a C.
Okay. So that.
You know what I'm realizing?
What?
We don't have John Gibbon on here, do we?
Yeah, somebody pointed that out in the chat earlier, but that's why I left those extras.
Oh, okay. I don't know a ton about Gibbon as a corps commander, but he did lead Second Corps for a period of time and was good at it, you know. But Gibbon, he's mostly famous as being the commander of the Iron Brigade in 1862, you know. And then just became known as one of the best commanders in the Union Army, really. One of their best brigade and division commanders. But Yeah, being honest though, like I said earlier, the Civil War I feel like produced a lot of really top-notch brigade division commanders. When you get beyond division, the talent just starts to evaporate. You know.
Yeah. So what about Gibbon at Corps?
Uh, I'd go with C, I guess. I'll be honest though, I don't know a ton about his core record now that I think about it. To be fair, to be fair, but nothing from what I have read in the Petersburg campaign indicates that he was incompetent by any means. Even though I think Hancock blamed him for the defeat at Reams Station, although he wasn't in corps command at the time, he was a division commander at that one. But I see you've got a fat reenactor for the image.
Well, I mean, it's just the most generic image I could find of like just Union. I tried to go Union General, but all they give me is like a Union Sergeant. So
I just like how you look at this guy and you're like, that's a well-fed soldier.
well, I just looked at him as being in the right age range for being a general. Although actually, he probably is older than almost all the guys on here now that I really look at him.
Yeah, most of these men in their 30s and 40s when this goes down.
Yeah,
And
so,
mostly 30s, actually. Yeah.
yeah, and this
So there you
reenactor's
go,
probably about
everybody.
55.
Your 30s can be awesome as well if you're okay with, bloodshed.
Yeah. Although in today's military, you wouldn't be commanding a very large formation in your 30s.
Yeah, what
Unless
would you command 30s in
so
today's military?
usually I think around the age of 30, if you're doing pretty well, you're about a captain, and you might even be able to make full colonel by the age of 40.
Wow.
But yeah, it's hard to get really beyond that while you're still in your 30s. And this is, of course, you went to West Point and you're really kicking ass in your career. You chose an MOS that uh, it really that promotes advancement. Because, for instance, like there are some fields of specialty that don't facilitate attaining high rank, like special forces, for instance. Actually, if you're an officer in
Oh
special
yeah.
forces, you will not go very far. But if you're enlisted in special forces, you will go all the way. Um,
Yes, that makes sense. That's kind of like artillery at this time in some ways. Artillery was one of the most prestigious posts, right? But at least during the Civil War itself, being in the artillery, they never wanted you just didn't get promoted very quickly. So your average artillery battery commander is a lieutenant or a captain, and chief of artillery could be a captain or a major, right? But not a general. That's rare, relatively speaking. I mean, you did have some generals like Henry Hunt, the Union for the Confederates. You had Porter Alexander
yeah.
made the rank of general, but that's not common. Like a lot of great artillery commanders in the Civil War, they don't make it beyond captain really.
Somebody asked about Warren and Sedgwick. I think we did hit Warren though, didn't we? Or am I thinking of Wright?
Oh yeah, where is Sedgwick and Warren? Yeah,
I guess we didn't get him, but again,
I could have swore I sent them on the list to you though for those two,
oh
for both Uncle John and Governor Kimball Warren. And Warren actually, he's one of the most fascinating corps commanders around, really.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, man, I got to use none of these fat guys for a placeholder. Fuck.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's what they're there for. Because I mean, it's been what 3 or 4 weeks since last time we did these guys, so I don't remember what changes I made to this list between because I did it right after we did the stream, so I don't remember it really.
I feel like I should have looked over it to be sure, because I would have noticed no Warren, because I've been writing about Governor Kimball Warren for a long time now. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like him in particular, he's a head case, really. So Warren and Uncle John Sedgwick. Uh, as Sedgwick's pretty mediocre overall. He commands the Sixth Corps. at Gettysburg, where they're unengaged. And what else? He actually did outrank Meade, but he explicitly told Lincoln, "I don't care." And Sedgwick was a big Meade supporter, very big. Sedgwick was absolutely beloved by the Army of the Potomac. He's one of their most popular officers. There wasn't anything, once again, there wasn't anything brilliant about him. It's just that he was a personable man. That's what he gets the name Uncle John, if you will. I'd give him a C.
Okay.
So let me go and put fat
accurate.
reenactor for this again,
A very accurate
Man,
Sedgwick here.
Wait, what's up?
A very accurate Sedgwick here. Photorealistic.
What the... Yeah, I always knew Sedgwick was a guy where I'm like, man, you've been hitting the bacon, haven't you? Warren's a very, very complicated case. Warren commanded an infantry brigade in the Army of the Potomac for a bit. He was a brilliant engineer. He's probably best known for a statue in Gettysburg that's on top of Little Round Top, because he's the one who notices that the hill's undefended and has men rush over to hold the position. Anyway, when Meade becomes commander of the Army of the Potomac, Warren is one of his allies and friends, so he actually has Warren command Second Corps. His most brilliant service comes at Bristow Station, where the Second Corps essentially bushwhacks Lee's army and inflicts heavy losses on it. He backs Meade throughout 1863 into 1864, like when Congress investigates him. He now becomes commander of Fifth Corps. Grant is very impressed by him as well. In fact, Grant writes in his memoirs that if Meade had died or something happened to him, that Warren would have replaced him. At least that's how he felt. Until you get to the Battle of the Wilderness. And here's the thing. On the one hand, Warren's right. He's sending Grant messages being like, you're ordering me to attack, it's not going to work. Grant forces him to attack, it doesn't work. Bloody failures at the Wilderness and Spotsylvania. This also makes Warren even more cantankerous and cautious. So, at Petersburg, especially on the night of June 17th, 1864, Warren has a completely exposed Confederate right flank that he could exploit, but he doesn't, because at this point, he was already given a caution. He's even more cautious now after the heavy losses of the previous weeks. I think his finest hour, though, as a Corps commander was actually Globe Tavern. And I say that, he suffered heavy losses there, but what's interesting is that the Confederates attack him twice, inflict a bunch of losses, but he doesn't give up. In fact, he falls back to a position, has it fortified. When the Confederates attack that position, they get mauled pretty bad. So he ends up winning the Battle of Globe Tavern. About him is that he got fired in the last week of the war. He didn't attack at Five Forks immediately when Sheridan wanted him to, which Warren was right. He couldn't attack at that very moment anyway. And when he did attack, he did rout the Confederates. But Sheridan had him removed. And actually, an officer came up to Sheridan and said, hey, that attack you're complaining about, Warren's carried it out and flanked him. Do you want to, not remove him from command? And Sheridan's line was, reconsider? Hell. So it happens anyway. And then Warren, like Fitz-John Porter, has to spend a lot of the post-Civil War trying to defend his reputation. So I don't know. I'd give Warren a C, actually. Okay. Despite the blunder at Petersburg and some other problems with him, I would say that Warren did very well at Bristow Station and Globe Tavern. I think he actually might have been a really good general if he was not in the Overland Campaign with Grant. It didn't call for his type of generalship. Oh God, I didn't even go over the part in Mine Run where in late 1863 Meade finds Lee behind a fortified position. He's about to attack, and Warren says, you attack, everybody's getting slaughtered. And Warren convinces Meade not to attack. And what's interesting is that makes Warren and Meade very popular in the army and very unpopular with Lincoln, who wanted to slaughter. He wanted Meade to charge in, you know. And I would actually say the Mine Run thing is really where it's curtains for Meade in that regard. I know he does retain Army command, but after Mine Run, he'll never truly be an independent command. Grant's going to be over his shoulder the entire time. And of course Grant would do that, because Grant's going to be confronting Lee, and, you want to beat the best of the best, but also Grant knew that while he was keeping Meade, the political masters like Lincoln and Stanton and the rest didn't like Meade and were advising him to remove Meade. Lincoln, not as much as the others. Stanton straight up said, there's a very weak man in charge of that army, and you do best to remove him.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to keep a guy like Meade around who doesn't have the full backing of the political heads, then it does make sense that you would hang around Meade just to make sure he's going to do what he needs to do.
Absolutely. So, can you think of anyone else we didn't put on here? Or?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody. I'm kind of thinking about some of the Western Corps commanders. We could have put Wood, Thomas J. Wood on there. He commanded a corps at Nashville, but that was about it, really. He did well at Nashville, but nothing stellar. Also, no cavalry corps commanders, because we already did the cav list.
Also, to be fair with the battle in Nashville, I think you've mentioned it several times as a major battle, but didn't the Union have a literal 3-1 numbers advantage of that battle?
No, closer to 2-1 on that one.
Was the outcome ever in doubt, though?
Nashville's a little tricky. The Confederates have a good defensive position, and they actually, where the Confederates hold defensively, they inflict heavy losses. However, the Union, Thomas, there are definitely flaws with things, like Thomas doesn't have complete control over the battle, if you will, or I'm sorry, when I say complete control, what I mean is that there's a few moments in the battle where Thomas kind of loses control, but Thomas's overall conception for Nashville is perfect. He essentially says, work the Confederate flanks, especially the left flank, and then use cavalry to cut them off or chase them down. So, Thomas really is orchestrating the battle with a very, very good plan of attack. One of the best I've seen. Now, on the other hand, it really helps the Confederates are low in numbers, but more importantly, low in morale after the losses at Franklin and whatnot. The Army of Tennessee, it's in bad shape. So Thomas is attacking a weaker foe for sure, but a well-posted opponent, and his battle plan's very good.
Weren't Hood's men also pretty ill-equipped for winter and also didn't have very many supplies?
Who, Hood or Thomas?
Hood.
Neither one are that well-equipped for winter. Hood does have some supply problems, but not as bad as you'd think, actually. They actually had a railroad going that was giving them some supplies out of central Tennessee. But they're not great. They're not great on supplies, that's for sure. Now, in the case of Thomas, he does have some supply problems, but overall his army's pretty well taken care of.
Well,
yeah.
I guess my image of the battle is I just imagine, Hood camped out around Nashville to the south, his men in rags, semi-starved, in the snow, and then Thomas has his much larger army at Nashville. They're sheltered, they have food, and they have coats. And then they come out and fight a battle, and then predictably they win easily, and that's the Nashville campaign.
A lot of truth in that. I wouldn't call the accommodations for Thomas's army cozy, though. They're still pretty rough. They got to hang out in wooden shacks and be on the defensive line just in case anything happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think you're overall pretty right. That's it. I mean, Nashville is not a walkover. A fun fact about it: Hood was actually planning a counterattack when his lines collapsed, because the initial Union attacks were disasters, really. And Hood was hearing about that, so him and A.P. Stewart were sitting around planning how to counterattack to take advantage of the recent good news, and then his left flank collapses. Um, you know, so yeah, the Union has a lot of advantages at Nashville, but it is still a very well um, managed battle by Thomas. One of his best for sure.
How would you rank Hood's handling of the battle?
Not great, especially after the first day. The Confederates on the right flank held. They defeated the Union, but it wasn't. It was the attack was only meant as a feint anyway. On the left, the Confederate forward lines had been overrun, and the left flank came under pretty bad pressure. And the Union came close to cutting one of Hood's two lines of retreat off. And it was very obvious that Hood's army was not in a good condition for a heavy battle. But he chose to keep going. He chose to keep going. So no, I don't have a high opinion of Hood's handling in Nashville. It's a very difficult situation to find yourself in, to be fair, but especially after the first day, like there's a lot of evidence that Hood's army is not going to be able to hold under a sustained assault that is well coordinated. I'm sorry, well planned, if you will. And I say well planned because the second day Hood's army did hold on the right flank. They mauled the Union brigades that attacked them pretty damn well. But on the left flank, they don't. They collapse. So, I think, I can understand where Hood was coming from with the idea for the battle about, you try to defend and inflict a bunch of losses and then counterattack, but you're also kind of hoping Thomas is dumb enough to recreate Fredericksburg or Cold Harbor, and he's not. I think that's the other thing too. Is it's not like Thomas. I'm sorry, it's not like Hood at Nashville. He knew he was facing Thomas. He had to have known Thomas was good. I mean, Thomas had been one of his instructors and an officer with him in Texas right before the war. They're both on the frontier. So, I mean, I don't know. Was Hood thinking Thomas is an idiot or something? Like, what the hell was he thinking in that regard? This was not the kind of guy who's going to panic and fuck up.
Yeah, and also he's got a pretty substantial advantage in terms of options just because of the materials he has available.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a guy with he's got a 2-to-1 superiority. He's got some decent commanders. He himself is not a moron. You're screwed. You're done. It's not going to work.
Yeah. Also, I heard a story actually from Michael this past week, and I wanted to get your opinion on it because it's somewhat related to this, but a little bit off the beaten path. So,
all right, I got to hear it.
He said that someone told him that he read about Napoleon's Waterloo campaign, and that one of the reasons why Napoleon kept committing so many frontal assaults is that he was worried after his original deposition in 1814 that he had lost his luck. So he wanted to test his luck and see if God still favored him. So he was launching frontal assaults to test his luck.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, because that one to me sounded a little odd, but he said that it was part of like Napoleon's romantic view of the world, and because if you think about it, like Napoleon's army at Waterloo was small but high quality, all veteran, so you'd want to use the men as sparingly as possible, and you can also pull off complex maneuvers because they have skill.
Yeah, Napoleon's Waterloo army is very odd in the sense that the soldiers are veterans and devoted veterans. Like, these are the men who are like, yeah, we're willing to die for you, Emperor. Okay? At the same time, his core division commanders aren't very good, for the most part. This is not the starting lineup for Napoleon. So, I mean, he's got some good people in there, but not the very best. So, there's like not as much officer quality as you would like to see, but like raw soldier quality, one of the best armies Napoleon's going to lead. Ligny, he didn't really do the front. Like he did. I mean, they did do some frontal assaults for sure, but Ligny really wasn't like Waterloo. I think Waterloo goes down the way it does because they attack so late. I mean, they're not really hitting Wellington until around noon, and a lot of that has to do with the mud and getting the army formed up and ready. You know.
Yeah.
So if you're, you don't have that much room to maneuver, if you will. So you go up the gut. It probably didn't help that Napoleon had never fought Wellington, and he also hadn't fought the British in a long time. And there is some evidence that he really underestimated the abilities of the British Army. Which is kind of goofy, but, I could be wrong about that one. Just some stuff I've seen indicates to me that he was underestimating his opponent. The test the luck thing I've heard before. I don't know about that. I mean, why would luck be tied to going up the gut, right?
I don't know. I don't really get it either. And also, I don't know who this person was that he was referring to, or what book they had read, or anything like that. So,
to be fair, though, Napoleon almost wins Waterloo. The British lines come very close to breaking towards the end of the battle.
Damn Blucher.
That goddamn Blucher. But I remember Board Game Geek had a thing one time years back where they're like, we got 3 new servers. What do we name them? And I said, Napoleon, Wellington, and Blucher. I don't think they did that, though.
Yeah.
But good. We got 3 new servers: Napoleon, Wellington, Blucher. Yeah, that was a famous story I've told you before where Wellington was getting his painting portrait done, and they wanted to put a stopwatch in his hand. And they told the guy, "Nope, I don't want them thinking I'm waiting for Blucher."
That's a good point, though. That is a very good observation on his part.
Wellington's a very intelligent man. Love him or hate him, that's a smart man. And a smart ass, too. But anyway, yeah, so, Blucher is decisive in that regard. The British lines do come pretty close to rupturing at Waterloo. I mean, just the amount of soldiers Napoleon's throwing in and the artillery. Probably the dumbest thing the French do is that cavalry charge where Ney thinks that Wellington's breaking and he leads a bunch of brigades, essentially to their death, if you will. That was pretty bad.
Yeah. So, alternate scenario: what if Napoleon had accompanied Grouchy on the pursuit of the Prussians and left Ney to his own devices?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, Ney may not even attack, or the attacks would be even worse and more disjointed. I mean, Ney's out of his mind at this time. That being said, I don't really see what more Grouchy could have done, really. I mean, he's following his orders, which is to follow the Prussians and hit the rear guard. If Grouchy can be accused of anything, it's for not really checking in with Napoleon during the Battle of Waterloo, and therefore one could say maybe being a little detached from things. But I really don't think Grouchy is the author of the defeat at Waterloo. It's definitely Napoleon using some fairly boneheaded tactics, if you will. And then also getting outflanked.
Yeah, I know that, like the nerd response is always, if he had just had Davout there, everything would have been different.
Yeah. I mean, there's some element of truth in that. I mean, I know why he gives Davout the job that Davout has, of course. Because, Davout, he trusts Davout, and Davout's supposed to hold Paris while he's gone. But it's interesting, Napoleon being this great military commander, one of the very best. And his most famous battle is like his worst battle. His most famous battle is Waterloo, and he's really bad at Waterloo. It's him at his worst, This is not Austerlitz or Jena, Friedland, Rivali. I mean, you can just go on and on with the list, right? Or 1814 campaign, right? Dresden. I mean, any one of these battles are genius, but his most famous battle is the one where he's like kind of an idiot. He's out of his mind anyway, and he's tired, he's fat, he's You know, he already knows like his wife and son are gone. I mean, in some ways, the whole 1815 thing is like some band doing a pretty cool yet still crappy farewell tour, right? Like, like I mean, come on, let's go say Napoleon's like, look, you want to say bye to me? I know it, and I mean, I'm not the same guy I used to be. I'm physically, mentally, I am not the Napoleon of Austerlitz, okay? But we can have some pretty good jams, all right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you're watching Napoleon, the Waterloo campaign, and sometimes he hits it, and you're like, yeah, the Napoleon of old. And the next song, you go like, no, that ain't Napoleon.
Also, I mean, in some ways, his 1814 defense of France was one of his better campaigns. So it's amazing that in the year or so that elapsed between that campaign and Waterloo, that his abilities went down the drain that much.
I also think, though, the 1814, very much brilliant. That was Wellington's favorite Napoleon campaign. He thought that was him and his best. 1814 for Napoleon is he? I mean, he still thinks that he can hold on to France, to his throne, and at the bare minimum, ensure the throne is there for his son Napoleon II. I kind of feel like 1815 is the equivalent of fuck it. What else am I doing?
Yeah.
And also, yeah, I mean, to be fair to him, on Elba, he's vulnerable. The money he was promised wasn't coming in. There were constant rumors they were going to end the whole Elba experiment. And he's like, and on Elba, of course, being the energetic man that he is, he did a bunch of improvements there. Like he like improved the aqueduct system and stuff, right? As soon as like a month into being in Elba, though, he's like, shit, I'm still in Elba. What the fuck am I doing, right? So I think he just invades France on a whim in some way. He's like, oh, let's see what happens. Oh shit, I'm in charge again.
Yeah.
Oh God, what the hell? I'm in charge again? All right, well, let's try to hang on to this. Oh, that's right. I'm not the same Napoleon.
Let's go to Belgium and see what happens.
Let's go to Belgium, see what happens.
Maybe Ney can pull it out, or this new Grouchy fellow that just made a marshal. Maybe he'll pull something off. Who knows?
Yeah. Hey, to be fair to Wellington, I'm sorry. To be fair to Napoleon at that time too. I mean, he still has like he can still he's still very popular and charismatic. He can rally the troops, of course, and his opening maneuvers for the Waterloo campaign are great. What did Wellington say? Napoleon has humbugged me, is what he said. So yeah, in terms of operational maneuver, Napoleon never really lost a step. Which in some ways gets back to your 1814 comment. The real genius of 1814 isn't like the tactics he's using. I mean, Napoleon's a good tactician, but I wouldn't call him a great tactician. His real genius is an operational maneuver. And that's really what 1814 is about when he's defending France. But yeah, I wouldn't call him like... And he's a very good tactician. In some battles, he's great. Like Austerlitz is him tactically at his best for sure. You know? But yeah, I don't know. Wellington's the better tactician.
All right. Well, on that note, I guess we can call it a day.
Or a night.
Or a night, I guess. So anyway, thank you everyone for attending this evening. Next time, I guess, are we doing Bill Clinton?
Sure. I gotta read the Monica Lewinsky stuff, right? Yeah. I gotta read I'm gonna read a Monica Lewinsky article. I just want to, hear her thoughts and stuff.
Next week, it's time to read about the greatest president in this country's history. Me, Bill Clinton.
He's probably, I mean, I know we're like calling it a night right now, but Bill Clinton's probably him and George W. Bush are probably the two most important presidents in my lifetime. And say Bill Clinton's like sneaky important though. Like people don't even know the shit that he did. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't even know about like what happened in that presidency with things like banking and regulation. I mean, everybody right now talks about the crime bill because that's the soup of the day, if you will. But I mean, his tendrils and what he influences and affects is everywhere. Um, yeah, I'd say I don't know. I think he's more important than Reagan. Yeah, as important as Reagan is, I think Clinton's more important. Really.
Yeah, I think that could be the case, actually.
I guess maybe we're lucky that Reagan always had a Democratic Congress to deal with, right?
Yep.
You know, I mean, he had to do his compromises, and yeah, and he himself was like willing to compromise. I mean, he wasn't like a psycho hardliner or anything, but yeah, I feel like Reagan got more policies through that were of more sweeping change than anything Ronald Reagan was able to do. You know, so
I was smooth like butter.
before I let you go, who was the one Michael wanted to come in for? Which president was that?
He wants
Obama.
to do Obama, yeah.
All right. I'll see if Danny wants to do Clinton or Bush or Trump. You
Okay.
know, he might be up for going for one of those. I know I want to bring him in for the Russian Revolution that I want to talk about in a few weeks because I'm reading some books on it, and I figured, why not talk about it, huh? I mean, it is debatably the most important event of the 20th century, right?
It's definitely in the running.
Yeah, it's definitely a top three, top five contender, right? But I mean, who else? What else is a competition in the 20th century for the Russian Revolution?
In terms of most important event of the century, shaping, of course, human history, man, I don't know. I mean, you could make a case for, I was going to say the space race, because, I mean, that, I guess it depends on what we end up doing with space in the long run. You also have the invention of
I think that's a big one.
computers.
I think we're kind of the mentality that led to the space race. I feel like we're in a low point for that mentality, but I think overall it's still pretty goddamn amazing to land on the moon.
Yeah.
You know, and beyond all the other achievements, first man in space, orbiting the Earth, sending satellites to other planets. So I think some of the space stuff. I think you're dead right. That's good. I just feel like we're in such a we don't give a shit right now mentality with that. You know.
Yeah, I think if we're looking at it in sort of the world history perspective, though, probably getting to space and getting to the moon might end up being the most important thing that happened in the 20th century.
It's a big one. Yeah, that's good competition. I liked your little joke about how World War II is the side quest and the real story is communism.
Yeah, I wasn't joking, but
I know I like it. I've told a few people that I'm like I think World War II was a side quest, a very violent, epic side quest that could have gone really bad, right? But well, in many ways it did go bad. But you know what I'm saying, right? So, but the real story is communism.
yeah, I mean, I stand by that.
That's not a bad one. So I guess we could say space race, Russian Revolution, and what else?
Space race, Russian Revolution, and I would go with the invention of computers.
Oh, the microchip, right?
Well, the microchip, I don't know exactly which specific technology you want to go with, but basically just the birth of information technology. Both, and not so much in terms of personal devices, because that really gets going a little after the 20th century, but just in terms of things being computerized in general. I think that that's a huge change that
Oh
has
yeah,
massive implications. I mean, not only in terms of jobs, uh, but just in terms of how everything works. I think it also really exacerbates differences between generations because of familiarity with technology. Um, it just has so many
I guess.
impacts.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned thinking about the generation thing. I mean that'll be gone within 20, 30 years anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
Every generation will be computer. Like we grew up, every generation will have grown up with computers and internet.
Yeah.
So, like my memory of not having the internet is going to be a novel idea, really. You know, kind of the equivalent of I remember when there were no automobiles, right?
Right. I'm trying to think what
Uh,
else. I mean, somebody suggested penicillin and birth control. Those are also pretty major. I guess medical advances, of course. Um, and vaccines in general made a huge difference. I mean, no one worries about the mumps anymore.
True. So
But
we're not going with World War II. We're not going with Germany and Japan and what they do.
I mean, it doesn't last.
No, no. But in the case of Germany, it fast tracks the death of the British Empire. And of course, in the case of Japan, it brings America out of its shell, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously, those World War II has a massive impact on history, no doubt. But in terms of
Yeah.
like that kind of grand uh, impact on the way people live their lives on a day to day basis, I don't know if it competes with some of the other stuff we've just been talking about.
It's interesting though. We're talking about microchips and stuff. And I feel like in the 1980s, based on the books I've seen, they would be talking about television, the way we're talking about microchips and computers.
Yeah,
You
although
know,
I feel like
I mean,
the internet more or less killed television. I think television was extremely important, but then it basically just got killed prematurely by the microchip. Um, and actually, it's interesting we brought that up because I saw that movie today. What's it called? Through Tammy through
Steve.
Tammy Faye's eyes or whatever it is in theaters right now. So it's about Tammy Faye and Jim Baker and their ministry in the
Oh,
'80s.
I saw. There's a documentary like The Eyes of Tammy Faye.
Well, this one's more
I
of a
saw that.
drama, but
Okay.
yeah, it's
So what
very
about it?
good. Anyway, just the idea of the in the '80s, well, '70s, '80s, Christians get on TV and do the mass fundraising. And even though it's easy to look at it now as being hokey and a little dated, and they're talking about we're trying to be the Johnny Carson of Christianity, even still, that actually was pretty relevant in its time. And television was the way to reach a mass audience. That was the way to build numbers that were unimaginable. Because Jim Baker really pissed off Falwell by getting 20 million viewers.
Yes, he did. He did. He did fucking piss off Falwell, and Pat Robertson didn't like him either. Yeah, one of the reasons Jim Baker goes down is because of some of the enemies he made. Also, Baker wasn't really interested in the whole like Reagan Revolution Republican stuff like they were.
We have
You know.
Baker, from what I understand, is more of a moderate to even slightly liberal person, at least back then.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely.
And I think Tammy Faye was
Um,
pretty open about the fact that she's like, yeah, I don't think gay people are really any worse than anybody else.
yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, they wanted gay people to not be gay, if you will, right? But at the same time, they're not fire and brimstone about the whole goddamn thing, you know?
Apparently, Jerry Falwell was.
Yes, definitely. Well, Falwell didn't like that they would have like gay people with AIDS on their show,
Yeah, there's actually a good
and
scene in the
they were.
movie about that today. If you go see it, it's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
funny.
Okay, all right, but like stuff like that, Falwell's not interested in at all. Um, by the way, fun fact about Baker. Last I saw, this was a while back. He lives in the New Orleans area selling insurance. This was 10 years ago, at least.
No, he's back on television now. He sells bonus buckets, which are really bad prepackaged food. It's supposed to last for 30 years, and it's in case the apocalypse hits.
Oh
And
God, those things. We were talking about that over here. We were like, so would you just like buy these buckets and live off of this? You know? And we're like, well, it's only like $8 a day to eat with those buckets.
yeah, but I don't think you'd live very long eating that kind of shit, though. I mean, the amount of preservatives that are in it, that can't be good.
And
And
no, that means you're gonna live longer, sir. More preservatives, you get preserved.
maybe, I don't know, maybe become a mummy, but um, Yeah, dude, like those commercials for those are so fucking bad, and also they always take popular songs and make their own versions. So they're basically trying to
Oh
recreate
God.
the glory days of Jim and Tammy Faye, except that no one else they have knows how to sing, because that was Tammy Faye's specialty, is she could actually sing. So they just have
Okay.
random people on who can't perform worth a shit. And also his new wife, her job is just to be there and go like, yes, that's right, amen, hallelujah. Anyway, it's fucking the Jim Baker show is hilarious in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a whole channel dedicated to just taking clips of it and editing them to make them funny.
Well, the Jim Baker thing too. Didn't he when he was in jail? He was like, "Yeah, that's when I actually read the Bible."
That would not surprise me at all. He also says, I've seen clips of him after he got out of jail. Yeah, the Lord spoke to me in jail for really the first time. But before, when he's on his show, he'd always talk about the Lord talking to him.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, he's about as sincere as they come. It's
At the
amazing to me there
same
are people who
time,
fell into the bullshit for him again. I don't understand. The man literally got convicted of fraud, and he's never been able to
well,
refute the charges. And he basically
I
admits that
mean,
he was fake. What do you
yeah.
do?
Well, I mean, come on, man. Mormonism's still a thing, right?
Yeah, it's true, but
You
yeah,
know, I mean,
also
you can fool some of the people for a long time.
no, that's true. I mean, I find it fascinating too that Falwell and Robertson are still going because Falwell died, I guess, same year as Tammy Faye, but it's funny too. Robertson actually stole Jim Baker's show. The 700 Club was originally a Jim Baker idea, and it was
Yeah.
originally hosted by him. And now Pat Robertson, it seems like he's been hosting it since the Stone Age. And, it's amazing to me that I wonder what their relationship is today if they have one at all. Because I bet Pat Robertson's like, must suck having to sell those shit buckets. I'm still the Johnny Carson of Christianity. I get to talk about gay Dakota rings and those short skirts those girls wear. Oh, I like those skirts so much. But yeah,
The
anyway,
Johnny.
yeah, no, that was their goal. That's what their idea. They wanted to be the Johnny Carson of Christianity, and they still talk about it in those terms as if people care about Johnny Carson today. And I find that
Yeah, but
hilarious.
well, the girl that Jim Baker slept with, that helped bring down the empire, right?
Yeah,
She got a Playboy spread and did a whole Playboy video. Yeah,
and she was forced to
she
pay
had like a
back the hush
whole.
money.
Sure.
Yeah, no, she made $1 million off of the Playboy spread, so they made her pay back the 200 and something thousand in hush money.
Oh yeah. Oh okay. Well, that makes sense. But still, she gets paid $1 million, man. You know.
It's true. I mean, she ultimately did win, but not maybe in the way that made people comfortable. Because I think, especially if looking at it now, it's pretty uncomfortable that this young girl who was taken to Jim Baker under false pretenses and told you must fuck this man. Because she was told she was going there to work for the Bakers and they were her heroes. And then she gets there and it's like, you're going to be Jim Baker's personal fuck friend, whether you want to or
Yeah.
not. He's a great man. He needs some support. So
You need
take your
some
clothes
support.
off.
I think the thing that got me was like, that she went in with the Playboy thing as fast as she did, you know?
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing where you're like, I think all these people are corrupt and fucked up in that regard. I mean, I say that I got nothing against somebody getting naked and having pictures taken of them. I'm just saying, like, if you're like I'm really into Jim Baker and Christianity, it's like, you know what I'm gonna do? Let's go do some nude spreads, you know? Um,
Yeah. Also, it's amazing with the prosperity gospel people.
oh
If they
yeah,
see something that is an opportunity to make a lot of money, then God tells them that's what you need to be doing. Like somehow, no matter what it is, if it makes a lot of money, then God will come to them that night in a dream and say, "My son, it is time."
Sir, it was the 1980s, and it's all about nude spreads in Playboy and prosperity theology. That is pure. Both those are pure 1980s, like
Yes.
undistilled, not filtered, not watered down. There's no ice cubes in this. This is pure 1980s, sir. This and GI Joe cartoons. Okay.
Yeah, actually, if I was trying to think of like the top, if I had to explain the 1980s and just a number of people, one of them obviously would be Hulk Hogan, and then I'd have to choose one of the
Oh yeah.
televangelists for that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd go with Jim or Tammy Faye Baker, but it'd be one of them as the face of that 1980s televangelism, since they were the most successful before they got busted. And also getting busted was a huge part of it, too. Because, I mean, they were all fucking criminals.
What about the whole idea that they only get busted because Falwell's after him? What about that?
It's possible. I mean, Falwell was jealous because he was not as charismatic or entertaining. And actually, in the movie, that was kind of what they were thinking when they saw Robertson on TV. Jim Baker's idea was like, I could do that, but better, because I'm better looking and more charismatic.
Cool. All right,
So,
I gotta see this movie.
yeah. No, I mean, that's basically the thought is that they were just thinking about it in purely material terms, but then talking about God. Well, God thinks I would be good at this. No, you think you'd be good at that.
Anybody consulted Yahweh on this? I'm just asking, okay?
No,
For
I
a
mean, I
friend.
think it's just. I feel like with people like that, they probably just have a thought, and no matter what it is that they think, if they have an urge to do something, God is steering me. Why don't they just, when they have affairs, why don't they just go up to their wife and be like, look, okay. Actually, this probably does happen. God wanted me to have sex with that woman. What was I going to do?
I mean, what are you gonna do? Turn down the will of the Lord?
Yeah, exactly. Because I felt it really strongly, so hey, it must have been God. I mean, who else could it have been? Because I normally don't just get randomly super horny and then go off in an office and, do that. So, must have been God. No other explanation, really. I mean, yeah, it's fucking insane. But prosperity theology, I think it was taken to its highest level of accomplishment by Creflo Dollar, though, a man who literally made up a name that gives away what his prosperity theology is about, the dollar. And then he wore a
Who's
fucking
Creflo?
suit with like one of those suits where the jacket is designed like $100 bill,
Oh yeah, I love those.
and he held a goddamn fundraiser to get the latest and greatest private jet. Because he said his was a little outdated, and you can't have your preacher showing up meeting with these Wall Street CEOs with a lesser jet, because otherwise they won't take him seriously, unless he's on their level.
Did he have million? Did he have Million Dollar Man vibes? Is that what you're telling me?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, actually, yeah, Ted DiBiase was a fucking great character back in the day, because he definitely
Oh
captured
yeah.
that sort of charlatanry pretty perfectly.
Didn't he? He became like a preacher too, didn't he?
Yeah, no, of course, he's a real life Christian. Actually, most wrestlers are pretty into Jesus, and also very Republican.
Well, I mean, okay, the Jesus part makes total sense, buddy. You're flinging your body around, it's getting abused and beat up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've already committed yourself to Jesus in that case. What about Hogan?
Hogan, I don't know how religious he is, but one thing I learned about him recently, because I know a lot of the wrestlers have always bitched about him being a backstage backstabber and, not putting anybody over and lying, but I didn't realize he's actually a compulsive liar to the point where it's embarrassing and pretty funny. So not only does he play backstage politics and, lie to people about what he's going to do for them or how close they are or whatever, but he also tells demonstrably false lies. And if it weren't for his great fame in the 80s and 90s, if he had just been another guy in wrestling, he would basically be a Seagal level joke. Steven Seagal. Because he'll hear a story that involves somebody else, and then he'll insert himself into it. So, for instance, Elvis used to be a big fan of wrestling in Memphis, and he'd go see he'd go backstage and watch wrestling. And apparently at one point he's really into some woman wrestler they had there, and he might have seen like Jerry the King Lawler or somebody else who was big there. Hogan never wrestled there. And also Elvis was dead by the time that Hogan got into wrestling in the first place, because Hogan actually wanted to be a rock star before that. And then people recruited him because they said, "You're big as fuck, you should be a wrestler."
Yeah.
So anyway, he made up a story that he was in Memphis wrestling and that Elvis saw him backstage and said he was really good. There's no way that's true. There's a 0% chance. It's just shit like that, and I'm trying to think, what was the other example that he had? Oh, he claims that in the movie The Wrestler that Darren Aronofsky called him 3 times and begged him to take the role, but he declined because he thought he wasn't worthy of it. And when they asked Darren Aronofsky, he said, "I never offered Hogan that role one time. I never even considered him in my mind for that role." I mean,
I believe Hogan on that one.
Well, also, yeah, the thing about Hogan, though, I mean, he's got a acting record. You know he can't pull off a complex role based on his previous work.
Off. I've seen Mr. Nanny, okay? All right.
Well, I mean, I've seen No Holds Barred and a lot of his other work, and I can tell you
Suburban
that man
Commando.
cannot act. Yeah.
Santa with muscles.
There's no fucking way he could have pulled off The Wrestler. And no one in their right mind would have assumed that he could.
Yeah, no, God, no. I mean, I thought maybe they would have contacted him for, like, some kind of, like, advising or something, or maybe for, like, a scene type of thing, right? Or, like, you know, I think there's one scene in The Wrestler where he's, like, signing pictures, and there's a bunch of older wrestlers around him.
Yeah.
And I think they might have, like, thrown him into that, right? So, you know what I think might have happened there? Like, either Hogan's, like, a complete liar, or it's like a half lie. Like Aronofsky might have said, like, "Hey, I want you to do one scene in this movie."
I don't know, brother.
Hogan with his fucking selective hearing is like, he wants me like to be the lead. You know, it's like no. He might have wanted you for like a scene.
Well, also, to be fair too, there's no way you could put Hogan as in that role because Hogan is literally the biggest wrestler ever. So what would he possibly know about being a washed-up wrestler that people forgot about, who's languishing in obscurity, working at a deli? That what could he possibly bring to the role? He's not like Jake the Snake Roberts or any of these other guys who were washed up and only had a revival later on after they got their shit together and have a bunch of health problems and were forgotten and broke and everything else. Hogan never had that happen. What could he bring to the role?
No, you're quite right. Hogan never had that happen. There's nothing he could bring to the role besides the fact that he's an awful actor. I think maybe Aronofsky asked him to do like a scene, right?
Yeah.
And Hogan just went like, he wanted me in the whole movie, and it's like, no, he might have wanted you for like a minute of the movie. All right, that's it, at most. Okay. Anyway, that didn't fucking happen, and. So I can see Hogan being the kind of guy who has like a selective hearing thing, if you know what I mean. Like, you go up to Hogan one day and you're like, Hogan's like, I don't know, like, all right, you're at Hogan's home, he's making food, right? And Hogan like makes you a grilled cheese, and you're like, all right, it's good grilled cheese. And then Hogan, the next thing you know, is telling everybody he fucking knows that, brother, I make the best grilled cheeses in the fucking world, and this guy. Thersites, the historian, says so, and he's on YouTube.
Yeah, that would be a Hogan story. Either that or, he made a grilled cheese, but then he said that he made a BLT, and I said that his BLT is the best BLT. I mean,
yeah,
whatever it is, he'll take some kernel of something and then twist it. So a lot of times there will be a real story, but either he wasn't there, or he just took it to some extreme that makes no sense. And anytime you ask people, they're like, "No, that's not even close." But yeah, and the thing is, you would think a guy that accomplished as much as he did would not resort to that, right? Because his real life is interesting enough. He was an icon throughout the entirety of the 80s. And also he claimed, as somebody's pointing out in the comments, he also claims he was going to do the Foreman Grill. And he claims the reason he missed it is because he missed one phone call because he's out picking up his kids from school, and because the people got so pissy that he missed one phone call for maybe an hour delay or whatever it might amount to, that they gave the grill to George Foreman instead. Which is the dumbest story you can imagine, because if you really wanted Hogan and you wanted his name recognition, you'd be willing to wait for an hour or two for him to call you back. I mean, as far as lies go, that one doesn't even pass any test.
No, that one's dumb. That one's really dumb. You know what might have happened on that one? The George Foreman grill people might have, said, we can get Hogan, and they mentioned it to him, but then they went Foreman. And of course it went Foreman because, fucking early 90s, George Foreman had his big comeback. I mean, that man was popular. I mean, not in a way Hogan was. Yeah, Hogan was an icon, he was popular, but it's also pro wrestling, right?
Yeah.
People looked at Foreman and went this is fucking George Foreman. He beat motherfuckers. Actually beat them. No stage acting, okay? You're in a ring with a guy and you defeated him. This man fought Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle. He lost that one. He came back and he became the world heavyweight champion. I mean, it was on everybody's lips, right? So, yeah, I think maybe they mentioned it to Hogan, hey, we're thinking about giving you this grill, sort of thing. And then they were like, wait, fuck that. Let's do a Foreman.
Well, I think part of it was he turned it down because he was doing another product that was way less successful. And also he was trying to do a restaurant too. And that restaurant failed.
What restaurant was that?
It was some sort of beach-themed taco place. I don't know. Anyway, it didn't last very long. Because, Hogan's a surfer guy. And also he always had delusions about being a rock star. Oh, his other great lie, I forgot. His other great lie is that Metallica begged him to be their bass player.
Now that is horseshit.
Yeah.
I don't even fucking know where to go with that one. What the hell? Maybe he overheard him. Maybe he's hanging out with Metallica and they're like, our bass player sucks. And then somebody might have joked him and well, let's get Hogan to be the bass player. And they're all laughing and Hogan's like, wait, I could do that.
Well, yeah, because remember, Hogan, before he got into wrestling, was really obsessed with rock and he wanted to be a rock star. So I think in his mind, maybe he fell short because he didn't get to be in a major band. So it's finding it interesting, though, because Hogan clearly feels insecure about his legacy and has to lie to make himself sound like he's done more stuff than he's done. But if you were literally one of the major faces of an entire decade, really a decade and a half, you're the big guy when wrestling goes on national television. You sold more merch than anybody else. You slammed Andre. You did all this other shit. In your chosen field, you had the NWO moment, which was one of the biggest television moments of the 90s. What else do you want? Really, I mean, it's not like if you're just some guy who graduated high school and you went into professional acting effectively, you got to be in some movies, you got some of the biggest wrestling spots ever, you weren't even that good at wrestling, but you still got to be the number one star in the world. You made millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Well, there's a joke in movies it's a 20-year-old joke, so I don't know if they still do it, but the joke was Mother Teresa dies, she goes to heaven, and God says, so what would you like to have done with your life? And she goes, well, I really would have wanted to direct. The idea being that everybody in Hollywood just wants to direct a movie.
Yeah.
And if you're telling me that Hulk Hogan wanted to be a rock star, there probably is some part of him that's like, I didn't do what I really wanted to do.
I guess that makes... Now I think about it. Do you remember how every time he came out of the ring, he would do that guitar strumming thing on his belt?
Oh, yeah.
That makes a lot more sense now, because I actually didn't know that he had once been in a band, and that he was that obsessed with getting into rock band. But the thing is, if you're as famous and wealthy as Hogan, you can force this to happen if you're really determined. Because look at Chris Jericho, who's way less famous, and he started a shitty rock band, and he makes people sing his theme song now when he comes out in AEW.
Wait, no, Hogan did that though for a minute. He had an album.
Oh,
Remember?
really? I don't remember that.
Oh God, I never heard it. It's like it got songs like "The Hulkster's in the House." Da 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 da. Check him out. Check him out. The going gets tough. The tough get rough. It's fucking terrible shit, man. All right, like it's bad. I think what happened is fucking Hogan did kind of do the rock star thing when he got really famous. He dipped his toes in, if you will, and it was a fiasco. It was terrible. Like everybody liked it as like a cheese thing, or like that. What was that? Like I am a real American, right?
Yeah, Rick Derringer.
Like, yeah, nobody watched that video or listened to that song. Well, I'm saying nobody. At least I fucking didn't know anybody who watched that unapologetically and liked it. It was a joke, You're in on the joke here, right?
Yeah. Although, I mean, to be fair, Macho Man Randy Savage really did take his rap album super seriously.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Hogan took his rock album seriously, but nobody else did, you know. So I think like if you got all these things that for Hogan, he might be thinking in the back of his mind like, "Yep, I'm like a really famous guy at playing in a sport where everything's predetermined who wins." And you're talking about the luck thing. You're right. You were the face. You're one of the most popular men of your era. You were the face of wrestling at the time. You are the most famous wrestler of all time. And not just that. I mean, you got to be in. You got to have these movie things. You got to have an album, and you're talking about the money. You know something the big one too, though. I would think almost everybody in his era is dead.
Yeah.
Like they're all gone. Like the Ultimate Warrior is dead. Roddy Piper is dead. Andre the Giant is dead. Like I kind of look at Hogan and I go like, the fucker's still alive. I know he wasn't the most like crazy physical wrestler, so he wasn't as actively destroying his body as some of the other guys were. But I'm still like, dude, you're alive. Most of these guys are gone. You're gone, man.
It's pretty much at this point just Hogan and Flair from that period. I mean, in terms of the really big names.
Maybe what, Jesse Ventura?
Well, Ventura wasn't as big though, and then like Jerry the King Lawler's still around.
Yeah, he is.
But even Jerry Lawler's not as big though.
I know some people from Memphis though, and like in Memphis, that guy's God. He's God.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but
like he could start robbing convenience stores, and they'd be like, "Yeah, take everything, man. It's cool."
No, I mean, so you got Hogan. I feel like because Flair does show recognition of this now. I've seen interviews with Ric Flair, and he recognizes that he led an extraordinary life and that things are pretty awesome. And he seems like he's fairly at peace with it. And I guess Hogan maybe isn't.
Yeah, and in some ways, I mean, I know we're like fucking psychoanalyzing Hulk Hogan here,
Yeah.
but that may in some ways be at least one of the many reasons why he became as successful as he did. Is a man who doesn't feel as that accomplished is truly somebody of infinite ambition, right? And yeah, like he wanted to be a rock star. He became a big wrestling star. Then he did the movie thing. His movies sucked. They're fucking terrible. That's not like, oh, it was the director's fault. No, Hogan sucks in them. All right, I love him though. I love Hogan movies as bad movies. Like No Holds Barred is one of my favorite bad movies of all time. Fucking love No Holds.
The No Holds Barred is I got it on Blu-ray.
I'm telling Danny that. Like, hey man, he's got No Holds Barred on Blu-ray.
Well, I saw it because I was looking for it, and I assumed I would not find it on Blu-ray. I assumed it would just be a DVD, right? And then there's a Blu-ray copy, and it's $10. I'm like, fuck yeah.
Actually, that's the thing. I don't think they put it on DVD. Like, it was VHS, and I remembered I had to download it years back because I was like, where's the DVD? And they're like, there's no DVD. And I was like, okay, I guess I gotta download this shit. And when I downloaded it was a VHS download. Like, they even had, like, VHS ads in the beginning,
Yeah, I mean, I've got a legit Blu-ray of that, though.
That's amazing, man. You come down here, we'll do a big showing, okay? We'll do like a fucking theater. I mean, not a movie theater with here, but like a theater-esque showing. We'll do it at Lance's, like when we did Deathstalker 4,
Right.
Duel of the Titans. Is that Duel of the Titans, or what's that one called?
I think it is Duel of the Titans, yeah. Or Match
I thought
of
it was
the
great, man.
Titans, or whatever it is.
I really like Deathstalker 4. I thought it wasn't. I thought it was fucking hilarious. I was digging it,
Yeah,
man.
because
He's like,
I enjoyed it way more watching it with you guys than I did the time I watched it by myself.
he's like a hogshead of milk every day.
Yeah. But,
And then like Deathstalker's talking to me. He's like, come on, this is what men do to conquer, to kill, to ravage women. And I'm just like, oh great.
oh,
This is
Achaemenid
a fucking
Arsenic
diet
has a
program.
question for us for £2. He wants to know,
yeah?
so how would you rate Hulk as a corps commander?
Hogan.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I really don't know like how the Hulkster would have done at Corps Command, having nothing to base him on necessarily. But if I gotta fucking go with it, right? I gotta go with his career, to which I would say he's an S tier.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would hold against him, though, is he would definitely be doing a lot of politicking, so you'd hear a lot of stories about him feuding with people or backstabbing or getting backstabbed. So that could be a problem. But also, I don't really know where he'd have fallen politically. So I don't know if he'd have been with the Hallett Grant crew or whether he would have been with more of the War Democrats. But given that he's always been pretty good about picking sides, I would think he'd get into the Grant group. So he'd have probably gotten a lot of chances.
And also, whatever success he has, the lights are on. You know what I think? I think Hogan is the Logan of his time. Okay? You have John Logan and Hulk Hogan. That's what have happened. All right? You heard here first, folks. Yeah, I do want to say, though, on the one hand, I'm saying Hogan S tier, and some people might be like, well, and you said this to me before, he really didn't take as many physical chances, if you will. He wasn't like physically exciting wrestler. Like, he wasn't doing crazy shit, which may be why he's still alive.
It could be,
right?
Yeah.
I think that might be why he's a big reason why he's still alive. But, I mean, perfect showman, though. He had that fucking nailed. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was a dumbass kid, but I thought he was the man. Like,
yeah, I did too.
I thought, like, I was a kid, man. I thought, like, when you see wrestling on TV or you'd see, like, kids wrestling action figures or whatever, I thought the three greatest human beings alive in wrestling were fucking Hulk Hogan, the Macho Man Randy Savage, and Andre the Giant. Like, that was the triumvirate for me, right? Those are the fucking greats when I was a kid, at least.
Yeah, I guess that's it is weird though how I guess memories of the sort of millennial childhood were so heavily shaped by people who specifically are more your age than mine. Because not only 8-bit systems feature very heavily and then Andre the Giant, but I guess I was just barely too young for really both of those things.
What, for 8-bit Andre the Giant?
Yeah, I mean, by the time I started watching, I think Andre was off the scene. I mean, it probably happened when I was still alive, but I just wasn't.
I did see him on TV a few
enough.
times, but it was definitely into the career. He was. What's up? Hello?
Oh,
What's
hello?
up?
I'm here.
Oh, yeah. No, I saw him a few times on television growing up, and I remember when really, like, people look fucking depressed at recess. You know what I'm saying? Like, people in my age range were like, holy shit, Andre the Giant's dead. It was one of the first big, if not the first, big celebrity death of my life. I'm like, Andre the Giant's gone? Fuck. I mean, God, I had like a fucking playset that had the fucking Andre the Giant like figure, But but the 8-bit 2, that was that had come out about 1985 or so. But the thing about 8-bit Nintendo was it was around for so goddamn long, and it was it. Like, that was it. Like, there was nothing else to buy for like a few years. Like, you buy a video game, you buy a Nintendo. I've never lived in anything like that since, where that's literally all that's on the market.
Yeah.
Because every other era, there's always been some competition, right? You get Sony PlayStation, you got Sega Genesis, you got your Xbox, you got your GameCube. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. No,
But
that's
think about 8-bit Nintendo fucking ruled the roost for a good 5-6 years. That was it. There was nothing else. I didn't even know Atari existed. Nobody played it. You know,
yeah.
like I found out about Atari when I was in my 20s.
See, I knew about Atari because my uncle had one in the basement of my grandparents' house. I never played it though, but I did know what it was. But yeah, so I remember by the time I was old enough to actually play games, I was about 5, so it's like, 1991, and I'd tried NES a tiny bit, but also tried Genesis, and I think I might have even tried SNES, but I preferred Genesis. And so that's the first one I got, then I got an SNES, and I never had an NES.
Did I tell you the Sega Genesis story with me?
I think so, but I don't remember it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, man. Like it's like early '90s, like around the time like Bram Stoker's Dracula was coming out, so like 91, 92. Great movie. Anyway, so you have like all you these like older Gen X people, but they're not like, I mean, they're older than me, but they're not like super super older. Some maybe like around 10 ish,
Yeah.
right? And they're like 18 to 20, and they were by the way, they were fucking cool. All right, like these guys, they taught they were like, one of them was like Jerry, cousin Jerry. He was like teaching us how to headbang to Guns N' Roses and Metallica. Um, cousin Billy always had girls over. You're just like, these guys are fucking cool, right? So then one of their friends comes over with a Sega Genesis, and he has it in this big black bag that has padding, because you got to make sure it's taken care of, right? And he pulls it out, and they're like, "What's this?" He's like, "It's a Sega Genesis." He's like, "Kids play Nintendo, adults play Sega." Type of shit, And he puts it in, and he starts playing it, and we're just like, "Wow," because we're used to I mean, nothing against 8-bit Nintendo, but I mean, shit, it's 16-bit. We got double the graphics capacity here, okay? So me and my brother are just blown away by this guy just playing Sega Genesis in front of us, playing some kind of like pinball game, if you will. And they had Sonic there as well, and we're just like, this is fucking cool, And so I don't know. Hey, that kind of advertisement works, though. That kind of advertising works. I, after that, always associate with Sega Genesis is the cool system, Much as I love Super Nintendo and I got it over here, Sega Genesis to me is the cool system. Because that's what the Gen X guys who were like, doing drugs and banging girls, that's what they're playing. Okay? I'm just saying. That's what I saw.
Yeah. I wonder if that guy still has his carrying case.
I fucking wonder, man. I never saw that guy after that. Like, he was just friends with one of them, came over, and like Jerry and Billy were all like, fucking hey, man. Like they're playing it for hours, Like, whoa.
Damn. Well, I don't know, that seems like a pretty good note to end on, I suppose.
Yeah, not a bad one. I know we did the Hogan interlude there. I do want to ask you before you head out, though. I was saying that everybody in Hogan's era is dead, and you said Foley was. I mean, Foley's still alive.
Well, Foley's a little younger.
Yeah, are we missing anybody from Hogan's era in particular?
Trying to think of who else would be in his particular era, because most of the people would be, I would say, a generation younger. So, like, say Jim Cornette is only 60, whereas Hogan's about 75. So I'd say, he doesn't really count as a contemporary.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Flair would be the closest one. Flair's a few years younger than Hogan, but pretty close. Jerry the King Lawler's also in his 70s. And I guess, Lawler and Flair, of course, were the giants of the territory days. So they're sort of like the last living relics of that in many ways.
Oh yeah, back when wrestling was like very regional, right?
Yeah,
Like North Carolina's this way, Memphis is that way, Los Angeles is this way,
and
right?
then Hogan had the good fortune of going to WWF right when they went on national television, so that's part of why he got over them. And also, Vince McMahon was always obsessed with physique, and Hogan is more physically impressive than a lot of the other stars of that era. Until Warrior came along, but then Warrior was a psychopath.
All right, wait. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know maybe I'm dragging this out. My apologies, but so the Ultimate Warrior was a psychopath.
Yeah,
I
apparently he
believe.
was pretty hard to work with. And
Yeah, my friend Andrew has an Ultimate Warrior T-shirt, and I know this one guy. His girlfriend was cheating on somebody, and he went over and like beat up the guy, and then fucked his girlfriend, and then texted me the next day and said like it was like the Ultimate Warrior, and I'm like, all right, got this.
well,
and,
I
then,
mean,
and then you're calling him a psycho, and I'm like, I can see this now, you know?
yeah, an Ultimate Warrior, from what I understand, he always had extreme views, and this was in a period when it wasn't as common as it is now for somebody to have extreme political views in, say, a wrestling locker room. So, Warrior was ahead of his time in some ways. Because I feel like if he had gone in as an extreme right winger today, people would be like, oh, yeah, we know what those are. Okay, whatever.
Hmm.
We know how to deal with this. Back
Yeah.
then, it was unusual for someone to be, say, hyper right wing for no reason, without provocation, and to just like get up in your face about it and talk about Greek myth for no reason. So I mean, people knew that this guy had issues, and they were a little worried about maybe making him the face of the company because you never know what he'll say when you put the mic in his hand. So you gotta hold him back a little bit. And
Right.
also, he can't wrestle at all. Now, Hogan was limited as a wrestler because he didn't really train for wrestling until later on, so he wasn't as good at doing a lot of the moves, and he wasn't an agility guy, so he couldn't do some of the
No.
things athletically. But Hogan could still do most things. Warrior was basically just pure speed and power with no technique. So if you let him actually wrestle a match, um, yeah, it's not going to look very good unless you just want 88 clotheslines. I mean, because that's all he had. He had clotheslines and right hands. That was his game.
Sorry, I'm dying laughing. 88 clotheslines.
I mean, a Warrior match was kind of like playing the games back when they had those really shitty THQ games, or not THQ, but LJN games where you just walk up and you can punch, kick, or do some very, very basic moves. It was like, those sound effects. You remember that era?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was like with the Warrior match, except high speed. And then it's sort of like the early Goldberg, because the Goldberg was kind of the same thing in WCW. He didn't know how to wrestle, but he was really big. He had some charisma, and he could tackle people pretty effectively. And that was about it.
Yeah, he was imposing. Like he had that fucking like nailed that part, Like we were like, oh, it's fucking Goldberg. You know what I mean? And yeah, Warrior was imposing too. I was never like a big fan though. Like we had our fucking wrestling playset, if you will, right? And we had the fucking Ultimate Warrior, and I was like, I don't know, man. I liked Andre the Giant more, so and Hogan. So yeah, and I was never a Warrior fan. I mean, I don't hate the guy, but I was never a fan. But you're telling me that he's a psycho? This is great stuff.
Well, yeah, also before he died, 'cause I think he died around 2010 or 11, he became a motivational speaker, and this was, of course, after faking his death in the 90s, because he wanted to be left alone. So he had basically the WWF say that he died, and then he came out of that in the mid-2000s and said, just kidding, I never died, I just wanted to be left the hell alone, but now I want to be a motivational speaker because I've been reading a lot, and I want to bring the power of the warrior to all of you. So he then would give these really insane right-wing meandering lectures about Greek mythology and people paid money to see this shit because it's the Ultimate Warrior.
But yeah, I mean, they're there to. Yeah, I mean, I want to hear the Ultimate Warrior talk about Persephone and Hades.
Well, I mean,
right?
it's the thing is, it's kind of like the promos he did back when he was on drugs and in wrestling. They made no sense. It's incoherent. It's
I
just
did.
rambling.
God, I remember. Well, you showed me one where he was just like, he's like, Hogan, Hogan. And I'm just like, God, he's fucking nuts, man.
I'm gonna get in the plane. You're flying, Hogan. And I'm gonna take the controls. I'm gonna crash it into the ground. I mean, it's just. I mean, that was like the most coherent part of it. The rest of it was just like heavy breathing and. I don't know.
Got a lot of fucking heavy breathing.
Yeah,
a lot of heavy breathing, man. Wait, who was your favorite promo guy?
Macho Man, obviously.
Of course. It gotta be the fucking Macho Man.
Yeah, Macho Man is the best promo guy. I mean, there's some other really good promo guys, but Macho Man, I think, is still the best. Because he could both do that kind of warrior psycho thing, but also still be coherent.
Yeah, and he's funny. I mean, he had a funny thing, and he seemed like he was fun, too, you know? Like, he was always, like, the one... He was always the wrestler where you're like, all right, that's the one I want to hang out with.
Yeah, although I think in real life... Apparently, he was still really intense in real life, though. And the Macho Man gimmick is only a slight exaggeration of his actual personality.
Even fucking better. Although, I mean, I'm talking about when you're a kid, you're thinking, that's the fun guy, right?
Yeah.
The one I'd actually want to hang out with is Roddy Piper. That's what I'd actually hang out with. I'd actually be like, yeah, I'd hang out with Piper.
Yeah,
Why not?
agreed. Now, Piper is probably the coolest.
You know, that was, I'll say this before we go, that was a little ahead of my time. Like, I didn't know Piper was a wrestler. Like, I knew him more from, like, the movie shit, like They Live. You know, watching that, growing up, watching that, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't know Piper was, like, a wrestler until much later.
Yeah, I mean, most of his
really
best wrestling was before he did acting.
Yeah. So no, he was that was definitely before my time because I mean Andre the Giant he had been in wrestling a while, so we knew that he'd been around for a while, but they very much played him up. I mean he was a big star at that moment, you know. And like I said, like when he died, I remember people like being fucking sad. It's like the first like sad celebrity death I can remember is Andre the fucking Giant, you know.
Yeah.
But I was also there only for the tail end. So I saw him on TV a few times, and that was it. You know? And of course, he was in, like, Princess Bride. Great in that movie. And, like, one or two other movies, maybe. You know, but Piper, I didn't even know Piper was a fucking wrestler until later. Like, you know, I've seen some of his stuff, and I'm like, I don't know. He seems like the coolest guy. I think Piper's the coolest, man.
And I agree. Piper is, I think, in real life was probably the guy to hang out with. Of that generation.
Yeah. Probably so, man.
Although
I've
heard Nature Boy Ric Flair was actually not that bad to hang out with. He would buy people drinks and help them get laid.
Thank you, Ric Flair. Thank you. He would fucking do that. Now, before we call close to things, which you know I understand. But hell, I got work in the morning too.
I do too.
Yeah, I don't have I did a tour today. The tours, I must say, are pretty rough right now because it's a lot of bored people who don't know what they're doing. You know, they're bored, so they're just signing up for tours because they have nothing better to do at all. Okay. However, I do have to ask though. So you're hearing that Ric Flair was pretty cool. We're thinking Piper was cool. I've also heard Piper was cool. I've also heard Andre the Giant was very cool too.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Andre.
Well, he knew he was going to die early, so he had very much like, hey man, I've only got this much time. I'm going to enjoy myself. You know. But that being said, which wrestler apparently is the guy you never want to fucking hang out with ever? Like, ever. Like, this guy's nuts. And he is not getting you laid. He is not a funny guy, and you don't want to get drunk with this guy. Who is
Teddy Hart.
Who is Teddy Hart, sir?
He's a relative of the Hart family. He's a very talented wrestler, but he always gets himself in trouble because he's just that much of an asshole. So even though he is very well connected and very talented, people can't keep him around.
Wait, you said Hart family, like Bret the Hitman
Yeah, like
Hart?
he's a nephew of Bret Hart or cousin or something.
Gotcha.
And he could have easily become a superstar because he came of age at about the right time where Bret is, about to leave. Owen is dead. So there's an opening for a new Hart. And so he's coming of age. He's very good. He's very athletic. And in some ways, in terms of pure talent, he might actually be the best of the Harts. The problem is he's just that much of an asshole in terms of getting in trouble all the time for domestic abuse, getting in fights in the locker room, not getting along with anyone backstage. So you can't keep him around. The man is locker room cancer.
God. And so I imagine you said athleticism, so he was getting in there around the time that was a big deal, right? Like late '90s, early aughts, when being like very athletic was all the rage.
Yes, I mean he had the ability to keep up, but he also had the fundamentals because as a Hart, had been trained and all the different moves. So he was a kind of a do-it-all guy, about the right size to be able to do any style. Heavy enough to take on the big guys, light enough to fly around a little bit. So I mean, yeah, he was very, very well set up. And he fucked it all up. And now he's probably in his mid-40s, and he's kind of a never was because he still has not matured enough to participate in pro wrestling. Which, it sounds like a ridiculous statement. This man is not mature enough for pro wrestling. But it's true. And what's the other thing he did? He had a bunch of toxic relationships. He's gotten the cops called on him a bunch of times. He's hurt people backstage just fucking around with wrestling. Because he always has to prove he's a tough guy. I mean, no one really doubts him, but for some reason he always has to prove to people that he can really do shit. And I don't understand why, because everybody knows he can. No one questions that, really. But
this has got to be some childhood shit, man.
Yeah, well, the thing is, he acts like an asshole and then basically challenges people, and eventually people take up on the challenge, even though they know it's a bad idea, but he's just being such a dick, they want to put him in his place, and then they can't. Or once in a while somebody will, like if he messes with one of the UFC guys or whatever, but mostly he's one of those guys who actually can back up his shit, but he doesn't realize that you can't just go around beating people up all the time. I mean, see, I don't know. I feel like it's such an incredibly basic thing in life that you realize, yeah, I can't get in a fight every day. But not Teddy Hart. He doesn't understand that. He thinks you can.
You tell me what Teddy Hart really needed to do is be in the Mongol horde, is what you're telling me.
I mean, he would get killed by one of the other soldiers for being an asshole, though.
I know, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you're like, well, actually, he would be killed. Fucking Subotai would be like, put him in the front,
Yeah.
You're in the front rank of the Mongol horde. You know what I'm saying?
You're in the vanguard. If somebody ambushes us, you're the first. We'll know when you scream out in agony as you're dying. You'll finally have served a purpose.
Are you telling me you don't want to be the point man? Is that it?
Probably not. I mean, not unless you're a really good scout. But
although I gotta say, Achamedia. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it right now. A little too much drink. But Achaemenid Arsenic. God, what a great name. Most of the video will be about wrestling and not commanders.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. I bet it will be.
Is somebody gonna set that up where you're like, look, if you want to get to the timestamp where they just talk about wrestling and Sega Genesis, it's at this timestamp.
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of our videos that way though. I mean, people know at this point.
I mean, yeah. I mean, well, it keeps it fun. At least on my end, it keeps it fun. I don't just want to like rattle on about dead guys all day. I mean,
Yeah.
I like talking about dead guys. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm talking about like fucking. I want to talk about Cousin Billy and Cousin Jerry and Sega Genesis.
Yeah, and Teddy Hart being an asshole.
Teddy Hart being a fucking asshole, man. Teddy Hart needs to be the front rank of the Mongol horde. Teddy Hart needs to be in like the stormtroopers in World War One. I'm trying to say like 1918 stormtroopers. Like you're going over the Western Front, trying to punch those lines. Put Teddy fucking Hart in the stormtroopers. All right, as a stormtrooper, man. We do have Modern Guru though. Gave us $10. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What do we have here?
He says, I'm almost positive it was Jake the Snake on Rogan. His stories about driving Andre the Giant around before the Snake became a celeb are absolutely hilarious. You guys have to search it. Definitely will. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. Was it a more? I just wonder if you're still on here, modern. Sorry, modern guru. Was it a more recent Rogan, or is this like some past shit? I'm just curious,
'Cause I also
I
do
did
have
see the
a...
Rogan where he
Oh, go
talked
ahead.
to Mike Tyson. I don't know if you're not into boxing, are you?
Not really, but
Okay.
I also do have a really good Jake the Snake story, but I think I'll save it.
Yeah. What
I
do you
have a
want to save it
friend who
for?
ran into him at a nightclub and had quite an experience. This is back when Jake the Snake was still on the sauce pretty hard, before he cleaned
All
up.
right, I gotta. All right, before you get, but before anything happens, what are you saving it for? Like a
Uh,
Jake the Snake episode we're gonna do?
no, I'm just. Maybe we'll do it for the Clinton one. I don't know why, but because it wasn't during the Clinton years, but I feel like it kind of fits because obviously because of Bill Clinton's dealings with Jennifer Flowers and Monica Lewinsky, the subject of sexual harassment will come up, and I feel like that is the time for the story.
Got it. All right. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. Nope. Sounds perfect. They're telling me it was about 2 years ago. Thank you,
Okay,
Modern Guru. Thank you, Bird New.
you have to look that up.
Bird New. I've seen you've been putting up a lot of comments about wrestling. Thank you very much. All right.
Yeah.
Although I mean, you're the true fan. I'm just a casual.
I mean, I don't
You
know
know.
that much about wrestling in the grand scheme of things. I haven't watched it in a long time, but most of what I know at this point, at least a lot of what I know about the modern product, I just listen to a lot of Jim Cornette videos because I like to hear him rant
A
about
lot of
stuff.
a lot of people I know don't like the way it is nowadays. They say it's kind of lame. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know. I haven't seen it.
Cornette's the chief voice of that. Um, and he talks about these different wrestlers. He has nicknames for them. There's one guy who's a little person, and there was one promo where they had him suck something out of a hose, but it was supposed to represent somebody else's penis, and now he calls him Dwarf Dong Sucker. And he just goes on like these really angry rants about this as if it's the most serious thing in the world because he's so passionate about pro wrestling that it's as if he's talking about some horrible abuse in the world. Like he's
Well,
talking
you
about
one time.
child poverty or some shit.
Well, I mean, if you're really into your thing, right? You did one time tell me where else could you go after the Attitude Era?
Yeah, so that's a Cornette idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just remember you mentioned that one time. I was thinking I was like, yeah, you're probably right. Like, where the fuck else do you go after the Attitude Era? Really?
Yeah.
What can you do? Out attitude that? Probably not.
Now, if you're interested in
Probably not.
wrestling videos, I recommend just typing in Jim Cornette and then type in whatever topic you're interested in. Especially if it's a little bit old school. He was there. He knows some of these people. And unlike a lot of people who try to be diplomatic or politic, Jim Cornette doesn't give a fuck. And he'll just say whatever's on his mind.
Okay, so who exactly is Jim Cornette?
He was a famous promoter and also manager. He's from Kentucky.
Okay.
He ran OVW and Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He also worked in WCW and WWE. He always talks about the tag team he used to manage back in the day, the Midnight Express. He was a heel manager. He'd go in and talk shit about people, like call them rednecks, say they're on food stamps or whatever. And he was really good at getting people pissed off. He's the guy who would always carry the tennis racket. The guy would wear dumb-looking suits and carry a tennis racket.
No, I love that. He's just like, I'm going to talk shit. You're a redneck on food stamps.
He did it really well, though. He that was basically his shtick, though. He'd pretend to be a rich boy, which I guess he kind of was. His dad, I think, owned the Louisville paper at one point. But anyway, Cornette was also really good at coming up with insults on the fly. And back when you had a lot more freedom in what you could say, I mean, he would just kind of dance on people. And they would often use him if they're trotting out like some big dude who doesn't really know how to talk. And then Cornette would be the guy to get him over by just talking about how awesome he is. So they used him for Yokozuna and some other people.
Yeah. Yeah, Yokozuna, yeah, he really he wasn't much of a conversationalist, that's for sure.
And apparently he was actually
Um
pretty charismatic and likable backstage.
but just not up front.
Right.
Yeah, that
Apparently Yokozuna was actually a very nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, that happens. Well, you can tell me if this is true. I always thought, well, all right, tell me if this is true. I always felt like Hogan was more charismatic on stage than behind stage. You know?
Yeah, probably.
And
Although
I guess that's from watching him do the movie thing, because the thing about acting in a movie is you really have to be able to, because the camera can be so close on your face and everything, you really have to fake real emotions in a way that where you're on stage, you can be more exaggerated, if you will. There's a fun story about when Jack Lemmon was coming off the stage and doing one of his first movies, and the director, I think, it was either Billy Wilder or the guy who directed On the Waterfront. I forget his name. Anyway, they kept telling him every take he did for like the first like day, they were like, "That was good. Take it down a notch." They just kept telling that over and over again, you know, because you're doing a movie. You can't be overacting. You're in Tommy Wiseau territory at that point, you know.
Yeah.
You're just that way the fuck over the top, man. You know, you're just like, you're tearing me apart, Lisa.
Why?
Which is a great fucking.
Why?
All right, wait. This is my last. Why? This is the last thing before I go. This is a bad movie you got to see. Watch America 3000.
Okay, America 3000.
America 3000. It's a post-apocalyptic movie. It's where men, at least in this part of America, like they don't say it's the whole country, just like the section they're in, men and women hate each other and fight each other. And they have their own language. I don't mean like, I mean you'll recognize the words, but they'll use them in ways that sometimes you have to like listen to it several times. Kind of like a Clockwork Orange in a way. Because with Clockwork Orange, the words are actually much more different in that one. They're much more foreign in that one. So they're using, English, but they're doing their own thing with it, and it's got some hilarious shit in there. Great references, like for instance, like the guys when they get their community set up, it's at Camp Reagan.
Wow.
But they don't know what Reagan is. They're like, we never like the voiceover guy goes like, we set ourselves up at Camp Reagan. We never found out what a Reagan is. So I can highly recommend America 3000.
Okay.
All right.
And if you want to get a
Good
taste
shit.
for what Cornette's about, just type in Jim Cornette and then on Vince Russo.
Okay, I'm gonna do that.
That is his great rival from the Attitude Era, and his rants on Vince Russo are amazing.
All right, I'm gonna do that as we're calling it quits tonight.
Okay.
So Jim Cornette. Oh God! The moment I typed in Jim Cornette on here, like Vince Russo comes up right away. It's like Jim Cornette, Plane Ride from Hell, Jim Cornette, Vince Russo.
Yeah.
That's what comes up. Perfect. All right.
All right. Well, I'll see you later then. I'm gonna go to bed. I got to teach tomorrow, and I'm doing something under observations. That'll be fun.
Oh great. Oh fuck.
Yeah.
I hate that shit, man. When they're
That's
like,
really dumb. Yeah.
like, oh, you get to be observed by people. I'm like, just leave me alone. Jesus Christ. I do a cemetery tour tomorrow. We do have tours, but just not a lot of people. And like I said, everybody's just they're taking tours because they're bored. It's kind of lame.
So it's like locals then?
No, just either tourists or I had somebody who was a worker today. Like she's like working in New Orleans due to the hurricane, which is good and all, but she's literally on the crime tour because she doesn't know what else to do. It makes it very hard for that tour because that's really a tour where you want to be into it. Which, to be fair, 89% of people who take the crime tour are into the crime tour, so it's great, right? But lately, it's been difficult. It's a lot of people being like, I got nothing else to do. Tell me about some crimes. And then you start, like, talking about the Bayou Strangler who raped men and then strangled them, and their jaws are aghast, and I have to be like, you're on a crime tour, you
Yeah.
know,
You're not on
like serious.
it's not like, well, this one guy stole a watch.
You're like, let's go talk about pickpockets for a second.
Yeah, there's a man named John Adamsley Helms. He's a famous pickpocket here in New Orleans, and between 1970 and 1984, he claims he stole 333 pocket watches before retiring. And then he bought a large house over on the West Bank. And he claims that all the money that he earned for that house came from pickpocketing.
There's this one block of the French Quarter where I have two different stories where a guy kills the woman he's in a relationship with and then chops her up and stuffs her into a trunk. You know? And you have to be okay with a story like that. Be like, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, it's all right. I mean, I don't approve of it, but you got to be like, all right, we're good. We're good. We're talking about a guy chopping people up and stuffing them into a trunk. You know? So yeah, everybody's mileage differs on that. Just lately, I'm getting a lot more looks and people being like, "Well, what did I sign up for?" And I'm like, "You signed up for a murder tour. What the fuck, you know?" So anyway, all right, I gotta look up. I gotta watch Jim Cornette like fucking talk about Vince Russo now. Who? I'm sorry. Before I go,
Yeah.
who the fuck is Vince Russo anyway?
He was the chief writer for WWE back in the day. He claims to be the father of the Attitude Era, but not really. He's more like he would just come up with really mostly trashy ideas, and then a lot of them will get shot down. A few of them make it through. And Cornette hated working with him because they're on the booking committee together. And I have to say, probably the purest force in the world is Jim Cornette's hatred of Vince Russo. Because he literally refuses to admit that Russo ever did anything positive his entire existence.
Yeah, although you mentioned the trashy thing, that was definitely a part of the Attitude Era, was the trash.
I mean, if Russo had had full, unfettered control, it would have been all trash.
Yeah, oh God, that's interesting because just to say, I mean, the stuff I saw with like, Hogan, Andre the Giant shit, right? Um, I can remember the Attitude Era and being like, wow, wrestling's become like more athletic, fun, but way trashier, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of
Like,
that was Russo. He literally watched Jerry Springer to get ideas.
God, that makes perfect sense. I would look at wrestling in like mid to late '90s and be like, this feels like Trailer Park on steroids right now, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's why Stone Cold was such a big hit. I mean, he tapped into something.
He did. He also tapped into some beers. I saw, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, right.
All right.
We should call it close. I can keep going, but we should
All
call
right.
it close. Thank you, sir. Good
All right.
night.
Good night. All right. We are off.